Meeting to order. Roll call.
Ford.
Here.
Udi.
Here.
Parks.
Here.
Gillespie.
Here.
Wimpy.
Here. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Attention, salute, pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's terrible feedback on these mics.
Yeah, my God.
Push it over.
Item 4A, General Counsel Business, presentation, discussion, and possible direction regarding the revenues, expenditures, and budgets of the City of Broken Arrow. Broken Arrow Municipal Authority and the Broken Arrow Economic Development Authority.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, good afternoon, council members, leadership team, staff. I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. As you know, as a part of the annual budget process, we have a time where the City Council actually reviews the proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And the governing body knows is probably your two most important responsibilities are, one, the appointment of the city manager and the municipal judge, and then the approval of the municipal budget, which all of the directors and myself will work within in the upcoming fiscal year. So what we'd like to do today is make that presentation to you and answer any questions you may have today, or if there's needs to follow up, that we will do so. And then at a designated time in June, we will present it to the public for a public hearing, and then it'll be adopted shortly thereafter. So as we've done in the past, this will be a very fluid process. I'm going to go through a number of slides with the assistance of Tom Cook, Rocky Hinkle. Unfortunately, Kenny Schwab is out sick, and so is Cindy. I believe Cindy is on the Teams call, so she may want to comment or two based on a question. Tom's going to cover what he can, and if she wants to chime in, she certainly can. The way the process is going to work, this year I decided to break it up a little bit to give the council more time to review what's being proposed. Is we're going to do it in three parts, and that is the first part of the presentation is going to be the general fund, BAMA, and our capital improvements, and then we're going to have a break for dinner. And then after we have a bite to eat, we're going to come back and we're going to focus on the public safety and the manual of fees. So I was thinking, and I spoke to the mayor right beforehand, is that we'll go to around 4:45 or so, and then have a soft stop right around there, and then we'll have dinner, and then whenever council's ready to reconvene, we'll come back and we'll finish the second half of the budget, if that's okay with everyone. Well, I can tell you is that I'm very excited about presenting this year's budget. It's a culmination of a lot of work by the finance department in terms of putting it together, but the vision and the creativity of our leaders. So the agenda for today, as is up on the board, is that I'm going to hit some of the highlights that are in the budget message, and then we're going to have a 30,000 foot overview of the budget. And then, as we have for the last several years, Rocky Hinkle is going to give a street maintenance program presentation. Then we'll talk a little bit about BAMA operations and capital. We'll also look at our proposed Oklahoma Water Resources Board loan program. Then we'll look at our general bond obligation project presentation for the upcoming sale. Then we'll have a discussion about public safety, then our proposed manual of fees, and then any follow-up questions that the council members may have. I just want to point out that when we think about budget considerations, the first thing I'd like to mention is on page 4 of the executive summary, and then in section 1 of the budget book, it outlines the budget process. And I know council members you always take the time to go through the budget message and the budget thoroughly. And I like to focus in on that just for a second, is because, I mean, there is a process that we have to follow in order to gather the requests and then review those requests and determine if they meet the goals of what we're trying to accomplish as a city. And that's a very detailed process. And once again, it all culminates with today's meeting and looking at the expenditures and then the subsequent action that has to be taken by the governing body. There are many factors that go into developing the financial plan. And for me, the most important one is not just financial stability, it's financial sustainability. And so when I'm putting a budget together, because how dependent Oklahoma is on sales tax, I take a lot of time and think about what additional ongoing expenses we're going to take on. Because we may never see the 2 years we've had, the last couple of years of sales tax ever again in any time in the recent history. It's as good as it's been, and may not be this significant. And you'll see that even though we've had a good couple of years, and the reserves are in compliance with the expectations of council, and that we are proposing increases for our employees, our number one resources, I still think that despite the fact that we've had several good years, we need to look at the sustainability of our budget and make sure that we have measures in place and that we're adding, whether it's personnel or operational costs, that not only can we pay for today, but we can also pay for in the future. And that takes a lot of time and discussion with directors and trying to justify those requests that they make before I'll put them in the budget, because every dollar that we put in that's ongoing is just a dollar we're going to have to come up with it this year, next year, and every year after. Now, some of the slides, as the council members know, is when I give the public hearing, I've got to touch on certain parts of our responsibility as an administration with regard to the budget. Some of these slides I'm going to go through quickly because you've seen them a number of times, and it's really for keeping the presentation concise but also comprehensive, and I'll hit on those at the public hearing. So as you know, as we operate on a fiscal year budget, which is from July 1st to June 30th. As I just mentioned, every year we put together a blueprint for what the purposes of the municipal budget are, and that blueprint is for providing municipal services for the upcoming fiscal year. My number one responsibility through finance is to match available resources with the community needs and then outline the work plan and priorities for the organization. We continue to have the following priorities. First and foremost is maintaining fiscal soundness, public safety and preparedness, a comprehensive economic development administration, because it creates actually the fuel that drives the engine, affordable public utilities, ongoing investments in public infrastructure, and maintaining a great quality of life in the community. This year's budget book has, obviously it's quite lengthy, but it does comprehensively explain to the governing body and the public, because I do think now with how transparent we are with what we do as a city, there are folks that do get on our website, will look at the budget, will contact you and ask questions. And I think the more comprehensive we are, the easier it is to justify the things that we do, because it's out there for people to see. There's nothing that's hidden. This is how much money we have in the bank. This is what we're planning on spending it on. And I think it's what people want to know. So you have the city manager's executive summary, the proposed revenue and expenditures for each fund, and we have 33 different funds. Proposed department budgets, special funds, proposed expenditures, revenues, and fund balance, the street maintenance plan, which now, because of the growth in sales tax this year, could be over $4 million in terms of street maintenance improvements that we can make, in addition to what's being proposed, a little over $2 million in the general obligation bond sale. So actually this year you'll be giving the administration, I believe, over $6 million to make road improvements, which is absolutely amazing. Then we'll look at the proposed 2023 general obligation bond sale, but we sell in 2022. And the OWRB loan, obviously we have many water and wastewater needs that we need to present to the governing body. And then the all-important manual fees, which actually outlines what we can charge for services within our city, for city services. So as the council members know, and you hear me talk about it ad nauseum, the four key budgeting practices really are estimate revenues and expenditures conservatively. This year you'll see we're only anticipating about a 1.5% in sales tax growth, with about a 2% in the other revenues. And the good thing about that is, yes, could we project something higher? Absolutely, we could. Some communities are up around 2.5% to 3%. For the way we budget, and the fact that we have several funds that, regardless of what we take in, they get a percentage. For example, the police and fire get a little over 30 and 36% of all available revenue. So if we estimate low, we come in over those estimates, those funds still continue to reap the additional money that's taken in. Plus, that gives us additional revenue for future years if our estimates are more conservative than they could be. Include built-in contingencies for unexpected activities, or build up our fund reserves. which obviously that's extremely important because we don't know if there could be a downturn in the economy or we could have some type of man-made or natural disaster that affects a certain portion of our economy. And once again, focus on long-term financial sustainability. For me, I talk to all of you on a regular basis, and the one thing that I hear continuously, and I know the directors focus on it, is implementation of Council's ongoing number one priority, and that's great services to the community. You could say that many different ways. To me, it's how do you get to yes as often as possible without there being unintended consequences. Sometimes it may be easier to say no and tell them why than it is to say yes and have unintended consequences. Secondly is address our increasing demands for public infrastructure and public services. Once again, we're a growing community. I don't see that slowing down anytime soon, so we're going to have to continue to look at our infrastructure. And then once again, make sure that Broken Arrow remains a place that has a very high quality of life. So for the budget, I always love to show this slide because it tells you exactly what we're asking folks that purchase in our community, albeit Tulsa or Wagner County, what our sales tax rate is. So last time we had an adjustment was in 2015, and that was just a repurposing. So in Tulsa County, it's 8.417. In Wagner County, it's 8.8 respectively. So that's what folks pay when they come and shop in our city. With regard to the proposed budget for next year fiscal year, just right around the corner, the budget is $311 million, $311,373,303. That represents a 2.6% increase over the FY23 budget, which was $303,420,407. The breakdown is up on the screen, which shows that the operational expenses for this year as proposed to the council are $141,931,798. This represents an 8.8 or a little less than 9% over the previous year of $130 million. 0.3. The capital outlay, there's a 3.3% decrease in the previous year for $136 million. And then the debt service for this year is up 3% over last year of $31 million for $32.9, almost $33 million. That's how we arrived at the $311 million budget for next year. So you can see we had a small increase in operational costs, and we did take into consideration the fact that obviously gas is higher and the cost of utilities are going to be higher. We looked very closely. There was not just a regular across-the-board 4 or 5% added. What finance did was they looked at what was in each budget and determined based on usage plus what they believe what the additional cost is going to be to come up with an increase in each of those respective budgets, because obviously what the police department or fire department use in fuel is much higher than you might see in some of the other smaller departments. I always like to put these pie charts up there because I think they're very revealing. It shows where does our revenue for the city come from. And once again, taxes represent 30% of all of our revenue, and there's the other charges, and all these slides are in the council's budget book. But once again, it just demonstrates where the revenue comes from that we receive to be able to pay for city services. Does anyone have any questions on where the revenue comes from? Yes.
What's the interest?
That's
Literally that much, the same as you would earn interest on your checking account at your financial institution. I mean, for us, it's obviously our depository accounts, and then we do have an investment policy, and it's primarily CDs and governmental T-bills, and so it's the interest off those items. And with the recent rate market, interest has not been a large revenue source.
Thanks, Tom.
license and permitting fees. Council is aware of those. Tom, why don't you talk a little bit about the transfers in, because that's a question someone usually has every year.
So transfers in, I mean, the predominant amount or the largest amount of that is the required transfer for public safety. As Mr. Spurgeon alluded to earlier, we do have an ordinance that requires us to transfer 36.7% to the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund Police, and 30.7% to the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund Fire. And then with the way that we have to account for the 1% sales tax for the municipal authority, authorities are not taxing bodies, and so that tax comes into the general fund, is transferred out to the municipal authority, and then currently we are able to transfer that money back to the general fund for operations. And so that is why it is such a large amount in transfers.
It's kind of complicated, isn't it, to have to bring it into the city and then you send it to the authority, then back to the city. You know, if there ever comes a day where the Bama has a serious problem, one of the first things we'd have to do is we would have to reduce the amount that we would transfer to the general government, because we're obligated to make sure that 1% is utilized for Bama first, and we've been fortunate enough every year to be able to transfer the full amount that I'm aware of. So, where does the money go? I think this is an important slide. It shows that, you know, out of our $311 million proposed budget, about $91 million, almost $92 million is for personnel expenses. The city has nearly 900 full-time employees, and then we have a number of part-time and then seasonal, so we're actually pushing about 975 total number of employees. That number is actually in the executive summary, but as you can see is that I would say right around 900 full-time, maybe a little bit below that. Debt service, I mean, obviously, let's talk about that, Tom. That 32 million, almost 33 million is made up of what?
Okay, so it is roughly $13 million in, thank you, Rocky, OWRB related loan debt. It's about $17 million in general obligation bond debt. There's about $2 million that is Bass Pro, and then the financing for the TIF loans make up the rest of it.
And then a capital outlay, that's all of the capital outlay being proposed for this fiscal year, which includes the general bond obligations.
Correct.
Why don't you talk a little about that, Tom?
So the capital outlay is going to be GO bonds, and just off the top of my head, one example would be in the 2018 GO bond issue, budgeted for this year is roughly $49 million in capital outlay. Bama has roughly $2.8 million in pay-as-you-go capital budgeted, and then an additional $38 million in existing OWRB loans, and then STCI, of course, is several $million also.
Any questions on that slide, folks? Okay, more specifically, one of our major funds is the general fund, which consists of a majority of the services we provide our community that are not police and fire or utilities. That budget is proposed at $120,397,199, and that includes expenditures, transfers out, and the ending fund balance. Last year, or the current year budget, I should say, was $110 million, almost $111 million. This represents an increase of 9.4%, which expenditures is up 8.1%, transfers out. So, and our ending fund balance is 12.7%. With regard to the general fund revenues, the total revenues for FY23, not including transfers, is basically $79 million, just below there. FY revenues were up 8.6% over last year, and as I mentioned earlier, is for next year we're projecting a sales tax at 1.5% over estimated actuals, and other revenues about 2% based on estimated actuals. So talk a little bit about this last bullet point, Tom.
Okay, so on sales tax, as Mr. Spurgeon mentioned before, I mean, the last 2 years of the COVID era, I'll call it, have been historic, literally, for us, in the amount of increases we've seen year over year for sales tax. And so, especially me, but finance people as a whole, and Mr. Spurgeon, being conservative at heart, we have looked at that and, not knowing exactly what the future may hold regarding our sales tax, we conservatively have budgeted that at 1.5% more than what we expect our total year's collections for this year. And then with the other revenues, and by the other revenues, we're talking about community development fees, building permits, inspections, our court fines, just two large examples. We are using a 2% increase in growth. And some of that is because we continue to have near record permits issued, and we have just have the trend, as the slide earlier showed, that our actual revenues have increased that would warrant that type of increase.
So what does the council think? I mean, that's very conservative. Is everyone comfortable with that?
Yeah, because I don't see us continuing to, with the way things are outside of our state, continuing to have historic sales tax revenue, so, yeah.
You can't ever keep the same when you have higher rates of increase than anybody else. You can't continue
Right.
that. But looking at our rooftops that are coming in, I mean, I feel better than what that says about about what's going to happen. But I mean, I understand the reasoning. I'm financially a conservative too.
But as
Well,
I'm sorry, Councilman Nudi, go
I
ahead.
think given what's happening with inflation, I'd almost want to be more conservative, frankly. I'm concerned that we're going to have people pulling back on their spending over the next year, especially if they can't get inflation under control. Under current national policies, they won't. So I think that is something to be concerned about.
Yeah. I was going to ask Larry to come up and just talk to council just a little bit about what you're seeing in the first quarter or so of the year in terms of permits, and what you're, just anything in that was relative to how the economy's doing based on what you're seeing.
Very happy to do so. Our growth within the department has shown that new permits are coming in same levels as last year. We're off by about 10 permits as we were last year this time, but a wetter season than we were last year can contribute to that, and so we may see more of an uptick during the summer months, but we're basically about the same as where we are last year. So a continued growth pattern, as Tom indicated. Same thing with licensing and other areas. And in fact, with the regulations that the council put in place over the past year in regards to short-term rentals and things along those lines, we are seeing an uptick in those areas as well.
Is there no concern, because I know I was reading, I think, in the Wall Street Journal this morning that they're talking about with the increase in interest rates and increase in cost of new home starts, that new housing starts are probably going to be diminishing at least for the next 6 months or so, especially with interest rates rising. Because, I mean, I'm genuinely concerned about whether or not our new home build-outs continue at the level they have been because of rising interest rates.
That is a concern that we also have, Counselor. Talking with our friends at the Home Builders Association, we'll probably start seeing a potential tap down, slow roll off towards the end of the year. But if interest rates and the feds go with the approach that they're currently taking, which is incremental steps, we could probably see not so much as a huge drop off as a slight drop off as the growth continues. We'll still have growth, but yes, there is a concern.
One of the things I don't have in the work plan, but I wanted, when Larry's up here, I wanted to admit the council, is that we've had some discussions as staff about coming and approaching the council about the interest in doing establishing a regional planning commission for Broken Arrow and in Wagner County specifically, because of all the growth that's happening out there. And that's something that we are going to come talk to you. I think when Larry's ready, we're just having some preliminary discussions about how that could be beneficial to our city, considering as we move into the future, the growth in our community is going to be to the east. And so having the ability to involve Wagner County in that process, maybe even Coweta, I'm not sure you want to touch on that real quick, Larry?
Yeah.
I have you up here.
Let me pull up that data real quick, because actually I was crunching the numbers last night.
We discussed this a year ago, and I know this has been in the works.
Yeah, as council has indicated back in 2019 when we adopted the comprehensive plan, the council agreed at that time that a regional planning commission was something for us to consider at that time because of all the growth that's happening over on the Wagner County side. As we have moved forward, we have actually found that a city-county planning commission is the more appropriate way for us to go. It would be an additional planning commission outside the city limits of Broken Arrow. Our current planning commission would stay in place. This would be a new planning commission that we would partner with Wagner County on and incorporate basically the area within our fence line, maybe a little bit outside that area, to coordinate with our friends at the Broken Arrow Public Schools.
Would it function similar to TMAPC?
Very similar to TMAPC. In fact, nearly identical, except for TMAPC regulates also the zoning within the city of Broken Arrow, where
Right.
this would not. This would only regulate areas outside of the city of Broken Arrow, where our current planning commission would continue to function as a regular planning commission. Crunching the numbers, as we have seen the growth over in the Adams Creek Basin, as you know, Council, we've been looking as a part of the sewer plant and study as a part of that, is that we are predicting that over the next 20 years to see an additional 14,159 homes just in that area of the city alone. That's 14,150 new homes that will be coming into our community. And so that is an estimated growth of, nearly 30,000 to 40,000 new citizens that would be joining us over the next 40 years. Culminating the entire basin of that area and the city of Broken Arrow, within the next 100 years, we expect to see the potential of over 240,000 people within the city of Broken Arrow and our fence line alone. That total over in the next 100 years. So again, and that was going back and looking at our entire growth over the last 12 years. So going back to even whenever we had the Great Recession and using our average or our means associated with that, we're projecting about 550 new homes within the city of Broken Arrow every single year, projecting in addition to that in Wagner County an estimated 349 new homes every year. So that growth pattern will continue to grow and grow and grow. Will it slow down? Yes. Will it continue to grow though? Will we continue to grow? Yes.
Thanks, Larry. So I do think that with that number of residents coming in every year, there is going to be growth, but I'd rather be conservative. And I think you all hit on, I had inflation. I don't believe we're going to see the record increase in sales tax collections. I do think it will continue to some degree, but not like we've seen last fall. And also I think the supply chain issues and the lack of availability of materials, vehicles, equipment is actually going to be a concern for us. So, okay.
So I'm sorry to harp, but with that in mind, is 1.5, is that even a little too aggressive?
We talked about it a great deal, we being finance, Tom, Cindy, and I, Norm, and Kenny, and we feel comfortable with that number. I've asked some other communities in the area, and they're actually projecting a little bit higher than we are. So I feel pretty good about it.
What was it last year? What was our projected increase? Do you remember?
We were as conservative then, and we did use 1.5%, and we had the same concerns at that time as to the sustainability of the growth that we had had over the prior year. And I mean, at least personally, and I think Cindy would agree that she did not have the expectation that we would have the current year growth that we've had.
Because traditionally in a presidential election year, people hold back from capital, like not just capital improvements, but just capital expenses.
Correct.
And so, or investments. So, I mean, considering that, we did even more amazing during that year and as we've especially a COVID year.
The only benefit is that with gas prices being so high, people will not travel as much, they'll spend more money close to home. But I'm just, inflation is something that's really alarming me, and I'm just a little nervous.
Understandably so.
Well, what we do, and that's a great question, Councilman, what we do is we look at it, and Finance looks at it on probably a daily basis, and what they'll do is each month they come to me and we talk about where we're at with the budget, and if in fact the revenues are not coming in as anticipated, then we would immediately look to scale back on the expenditures. And we'd update the council either if, depending on if something catastrophic happened, to be immediately. If not, it'd probably be at the quarterly update. But they look at it monthly, and if we have any concerns, I would start reducing expenditures down to probably just what is absolutely personnel and what's essential, and then we would adjust the projections accordingly. And that could mean that we'd have to reduce the amount of expenditures that we were making that were approved, and that time we'd come back to council and update you on what we're doing.
That's what I was gonna say too, is that, you know what I mean? It's not like it's a do or die, you know, that level, because if they do start coming in less, then you're gonna cut back on your amount of spending, cut back on the budget at that time. As long as staff is monitoring that closely, I don't see that it could really hurt us. I like to see it be conservative. I have concerns for the economy also, but, you know, I see things going pretty good all over the city of Broken Arrow. And so I think as long as we're looking at it each month, that this is, I'm fine with the 1.5%.
Let me see, Cindy may want to comment here. Can we see if Cindy has any comment?
Yeah, I'm here. If you can hear me. Yes, we look at the top revenues on a monthly basis. So if it is starting to slide, we will notify the city manager as soon as possible. And we always anticipate for the sales tax to come in, and we always, as soon as it hits, we are notified. And we have been very fortunate the last 2 years that it has been coming in strong. But I am conservative that it's hard to believe that this will continue. So that's why we came up with a 1.5%. We feel that's conservative, and if we get more, that's great. But at a 1.5%, if it does start to decrease, we haven't budgeted at 5%, then all of a sudden we have to cut back tremendously to meet our goal.
I'm not trying to be negative, it's just that national policy is so terrible right now. I mean, frankly, it's just so poor, and it always rolls downhill, and that's what's concerning me.
Well, no, I'm glad we're talking about it, because all the directors are here, and you know, we're all in the business of providing services, and providing services costs money, and if they need to hear that the council members are concerned, and so that way they just have it subliminally in the mind the governing body's concerned about this, and so the expenditures, we just need to watch those, and we need to see how the revenues come in. So I'm glad we're having the discussion. And I understand Kenny's on here as well, so he may have a comment when we get to other parts of the agenda.
Councilman Newley, the only other thing I may add is that our primary sales tax still is coming from the Walmarts of the world. And so those type expenditures, people are still going to have to eat, I mean, et cetera. And you know, our restaurants continue to do amazingly well. And so I think we have a little bit of advantage over some other places, in so much that it's going out to eat is not a necessity, but for lack of a better word, I'll use that. You know, the necessities is our primary source of what drives our sales tax.
Okay. General fund revenues, just a quick snapshot of what they look like. And then by classification, once again, 71% of the general fund is personnel-related expenses. And I think the directors do an amazing job of trying to manage the other services and the materials. Obviously, I mean, you can have all the people in the world, but you don't have other good budgets to help them, provide them the resource to do their job. It's extremely difficult. I like how finance put this together for us, just a breakdown of the general fund department expenses to give you an idea how much is in each department. and what that represents. Any questions on that pie? Okay, the one thing I wanted to share with council is that because we have some growth in sales tax, obviously, in order to stay up with the demands of our city, I did feel like we needed to add some positions in the budget this year. And here are the positions, and there are 13 new positions that are being proposed. This does not include what's being under consideration for the public safety departments, but there are 13 new positions here. One of the top needs that I heard from the police is we had dispatchers, so there's 4 dispatchers and 1 dispatch supervisor. I do think we'll have challenge filling those positions. However, having additional positions, and if we can afford to increase the compensation, I think that we would be much more competitive and able to retain our folks. Then obviously, many of these positions are what I would call your support personnel. I mean, you can have people up front, but if you don't have those people in the back providing great backup services or behind the scenes, it can be difficult. A GIS analyst and coordinator for IT, a senior support specialist for IT, a SCADA, which is going to be working closely with our utility department. That's supervisory control and data acquisition. That's someone that actually monitor our systems. Accounts payable, parks maintenance worker, horticultural specialist. You heard Larry talk about community development inspector, and then a part-time planning engineer. So those are 13 positions that I'm recommending that we add this year. Does anybody have any questions on those positions? Believe me, I wish I could have funded all of them. There were a lot more. And it's difficult to say no because I know they truly need them. But when it comes to determining which ones I ultimately select, it usually has just a lot to do with the capacity, where are they at in terms of being able to meet those needs. IT, for example, has several positions on here. You've seen what Scott has been doing for us on the back end since he started about 18 months ago. Actually longer than that. It's been over 2 years. 2 years now. It's been amazing, the support that he's given to all the directors. I don't know how we would have done it with IT without the pandemic, without his team. It was just amazing. So obviously he'll be touching everyone in every department. So finance needed some help. So if you have any questions, we'll move on. Sales tax improvement fund. So we're blessed that the voters have approved 0.5% of our 3.5 to be dedicated towards capital improvements. And this year we estimate the revenue being at 9.6. And once again, this is used primarily for pay-as-you-go capital expenses. It's those smaller expenses, and it's really difficult because the directors come in each and every year, and there isn't one thing that they ask for that you couldn't justify. So really it becomes a matter of priority. So it's broken down in the book exactly what that $9 million is going to go for. I wanted to touch on some highlights here of some of the projects that I have approved. So there's a bike expansion within the city, and the largest one this year is the roof, the repair on the roofs. Ryan has gone over there and looked at them extensively and determined that, and I want Brian to come, if he'll come up and talk about this, because obviously we have a major financial investment in that building and Bass Pro, so I wanted, since it's such a large amount, have him just explain what you found, Ryan, and why we need this.
So Bass Pro has the pitched roof you see as you drive by, but it's also got a lot of flat roof. We had this conversation just earlier that the roof is so large and expansive that you kind of forget until you're up on it. The flat roof has become so worn just from the water shed across it, it's starting to wear through the membrane. We have a roof roughly getting to be 20 years old that needs replaced. So even today we had a call from Bass Pro saying, hey Ryan, we're so sorry, but there's a couple more leaks and we hate calling you, but I mean that's our job. We went out and we tried to take care of those for them, but it's definitely a high need for us, and our city manager does a great job spotlighting that, take good care of them, we do.
Okay. Next couple items is
The bike expansion, is that completing what's because there's a chunk that's on First that needs to be completed. Does that include that, or is that addition to that?
I need to ask. I'm drawing a blank here, so I need to,
It ends right now, it ends about 2 blocks south, north of New Orleans.
Mhm.
And then, and basically is not complete until you get down to Washington. So is that including that? I mean, is that on the plans to be done?
Let me ask
in the near future?
Ethan or Kenny to respond to that, because I know we've got several, so I probably need to get some help with answering that question. That's yours, Larry? We have this bike expansion within the city. Okay. We have several. That's why I'm not sure.
Just blame community development. It's always us. No.
Thanks, Ethan.
Yeah, the bike extension is a part of the grant that we received from INCOG. It's a part of our 20% match that we have. And so this is the $50,000 is part of that 20% match. And so this is the continuation of the agreement that we did with this machine in Tulsa. And so this will be the second phase of the electric bikes that we have ordered. The initial order
This is the electric bikes.
the electric bikes.
Okay,
Yeah,
I was talking about the trail.
the trail. Yeah, and so that's I'm assuming a different project underneath a different funding.
I'll get you an answer to that, council member.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just wondering, because
Yeah.
it's been that way for about a year now, and I'm getting questions about it because it's right smack dab in the middle of the plan.
Let's talk about it and see what I can do.
Ethan should be able to answer that. We do have a current contract with ODOT for the completion of that mile. I don't know the status of that contract, but we do have a current contract.
Never mind, Ethan. Yeah. I'm just kidding, yes. We need to.
I didn't know whether to come up or go away.
Yeah.
We're finishing up the first mile right now. We're actually working with ODOT to finalize the final pay estimate, and then we'll be starting on the next phase here shortly.
We talking about the same, make sure we're talking
I
about
want
the
to make
same
sure we're
area.
talking about the same, because I'm not sure what we're talking about.
Say your area
I'm talking
again.
about the area 2 or 3 blocks north of New Orleans on First, going from that point to Arrowhead Park.
That's a different phase. That's
That's a completely different phase.
Right, when is that? So it's not in that, but when is it happening?
Actually, I don't think that's going to happen until probably 2023 or 2024, because there's federal money involved in there.
That's correct.
But let me get you an update. This is really kind of out of our control. We have our share.
I understand, but when I saw that money was going for that, I was curious, is that
Yeah.
going to finally finish that? Because it's been sitting that way for a year or more now. And
That money, no.
Okay.
But the problem we're having is we have our funds, but it's the federal government and their funds is what's slowing that down. But let me get an update from Travis. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is the 12-passenger van for parks, is that to, like for the kids to go from one place to another, or the van for parks?
The 12-passenger van, Matt.
Yeah, so the van is a replacement for a van that we currently have that has a lot of miles on it, and we use it for community service. We use it for the community centers. It's just kind of a general use van.
So we've had a request for a replacement of the fans at the farmer's market because it's so heavily used. That $155,000 it's a want, not a need, honestly. It's actually to make the lights on the gateway signs into the Rose District to where they're colored, and actually give us a lot more flexibility in using those signs. Dump trucks, that $250,000 is half of the $500,000 projected cost for the pavement management, which Rocky's going to talk about under the street maintenance. Then that passenger van, and then the Korean War Memorial installation, that's an estimate to look at sprinklers, landscaping. I mean, to do it first class like everything else in the Veterans Park is. Obviously, I knew council would want that. That's just an estimate, and I'll have a better idea once we get closer. But we're still looking at a dedication, hopefully sometime around Labor Day. So
I was questioning that too, just a little bit, because I thought $125,000, because I knew the memorial itself was in the, in 21 budget. You know, so it's already budget, so it's just installation, so you're talking about the surrounding areas around it also, and, okay.
I wanted to make sure we had a healthy budget for that, just in
Okay.
case.
Yeah, that's fine.
The piece itself was about 45.
45, that's right.
Right.
So is this an addition?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm a little, I mean, that's a lot, but then you're talking a memorial that's going to be there for as long as it's going to be there, and how beautiful that park is. I knew the council, and I certainly didn't want to do anything that wasn't considered top-notch. So hopefully it'll be much less than that, but I want to make sure we put that in there.
Where will it be placed?
Opposite of the Vietnam,
Children's? Oh.
in that empty spot.
Okay,
To your left is right,
Yeah, if
Councilman.
you're looking at the women's and the Mission 22,
over there.
the
Next.
Vietnam is over here directly opposite. In that empty spot, there's that empty,
Okay.
it would go there.
Yep.
So it balances it out.
Once again, you have a policy in place that after this is set, no additional improvements can be made in the park without someone coming back to the council. And you want to do that. Not that there couldn't be anything else there, obviously, because there's additional room south of the Veterans Center. But obviously, I think we're at the point where any additional improvements really need to be thought through by the council. And with having two entities that are representing you, I think it's important that they know that they have to come back to you and just can't automatically assume something can be built there. So, not that you wouldn't say yes, it's just a matter of this needs to be a process. And then finally, is I think everybody knows that the sand volleyball courts have just exploded with play, and I'm hoping that in the next bond package, the council will consider expanding those and adding some bleachers, because it's been amazing, and Matt's recommending that we put lights on there, and so that's something that I supported because I just see how popular that sport is there. So those are just some of the highlights. In the book, you can see all the specific expenditures on how we actually are going to be spending the $9 million that's going to be available. And that still does leave us with a reserve of between $4 and $5 million for unexpected expenses. If we had a bridge that unfortunately, or a street or something, we would have funds available to actually go in and make the repairs. I mean, if it turns out the roof improvements are $1.4 million instead of 1.1, then we'd have some additional funds that we could go in to actually pay for those improvements.
You know, that's one of the areas that, and not to just smile a little bit about it, but throughout history, we've always told the city manager, well, go to your SDCI funds. Surely there's money in it. Because the council learns pretty quickly that that is a pretty good place to grab money if there's some left in it.
Yeah.
For capital improvements.
Well, the most important thing for me is to listen to you all throughout the year about what's important and think of and come up with your ideas. I mean, for example, Councilmember Ford presenting the council the need for the fencing around the parks. You know, we're either going to find that in our operating budget, or we're going to take it out of STCI. You know, because you can't think of everything that's going to come up, and your residents may have ideas throughout the year. That's why I think it's important that we are following social media, that we are engaging with the community, because you're going to hear from them on things that they think are important. The sidewalk projects that we've done around town. You know, New Orleans, from Aspen to New Orleans Square, was a result of me getting beat up all the time about the fact there's no sidewalks there, and then people are walking in the middle of the road and then seeing them going to the gym. And so from that, it just made sense. And the other place we've done some things. So I think being out in the community, they may have ideas, and we need to have some flexibility that if council sees a project during the fiscal year that we didn't anticipate, that we could actually go into here if there is support to actually use those monies for that. Otherwise, it's there in case it's something unexpected, because something is going to happen.
So, and I know I may have mentioned this before, but I think one of the things, and I think we've discussed it at council before, but referring to sidewalks and SDCI, I think we need to develop a plan of where we don't have sidewalks, because there's chunks of Florence and quickly diminishing on New Orleans, but there's chunks of New Orleans, chunks of Florence, chunks of Omaha that don't have, and especially you get down to Tucson and Jasper, that just don't have sidewalks at all. And I think, you know, developing a plan where over the next few years we complete sidewalks on those main arteries is pretty vital.
It is, and in fact, for the bond package, just like we put in, I think close to $2.5 million for this year, and we've been using it, is that there'll be another plan that'll probably be a lot more comprehensive, because now I will have time to identify over the next 3 years all of those areas, and then we determine how much money is available, and then on a priority basis, we'll pick those sidewalks that need to be done. I mean, there's still a lot, but we've addressed a number, but obviously it just takes some time in order to get all this connectivity
I
done.
know, but they don't call us to tell us how great the sidewalks look. They call us to tell us why they aren't.
Oh, yes, they do.
No, I'm
They
just kidding.
call us. You need it around schools especially.
Yeah.
Tucson needs it.
Okay, next is areas the ARPA, and I wanted to specifically mention this, and that is when we first received our ARPA funds, which were about $13.7 million, it was pretty clear that we weren't going to be able to use it except for a couple of categories. And then there was a decision made by the Treasury Department that, in essence, said that the first $10 million, the city can essentially use that money, excuse me, as the city council is determined, and the only real requirement was you have to spend it within the time frame that was allotted. And so if you remember, we were talking essentially at that time, anything that was public safety related or water and sewer. And what you have before you, excuse me just a minute. What you have before you is my recommendations on how we would spend the remaining funds. Now, we've spent approximately $900,000 of the 13.7 towards the water or sewer projects on the TIF district, because that was an eligible expense. And last year, early this year, we actually approved $1.1 million for 3 new ambulances. And then we had a couple of other smaller expenses that we paid for. So essentially, there's around, I would say around $11 million, $10.5 million that's left, which means that only about $500,000 of that would be restricted towards water and sewer or public safety. And so the first thing I wanted to recommend to you is for us not to be like some cities and using the money to either fund or use as seed money for ongoing expenses. I just don't think that is the right thing to do because of the ongoing cost that goes with it. So what I did was I tried to look at just a couple of categories. One of them was infrastructure, one of them was public safety, another was economic development. Because I think those are all very justifiable to the public, because each and every one of those categories in essence touches all of our residents either directly or indirectly. And so as you can see here, obviously we have a broadband initiative, which obviously we have people that we're starting to hear from that live in those areas that are having trouble with connectivity. And as Scott presented last fall with Norm, is we still want to do an initiative with one of our providers to try to use $1 million to try to expand the connectivity to those areas that's underserved. Cybersecurity, Council approved that project. I mean, we have to protect our systems, and we found out during the pandemic every entity in the country is vulnerable to some degree. And we have systematically gone about reducing the risk. There's still a lot of risk that's out there, and Scott and his folks are on the front line every day dealing with it. But you got cybersecurity. Council remembers we leased three ambulances a few years ago, and we'd like to use $540,000 to remount those ambulances. There's some EMS expenses, police radios. Add $200,000 this year for the what's in the police sales tax for police vehicles, the broadband, the innovation district. I mean, we're starting to come to focus in terms of picking an entity to help us start designing everything. Staying consistent with what the funds are available for is using some of that in addition to the bond money for water and sewer, the infrastructure for the innovation district to help there, BAMA projects, and then I have 2 other categories in economic development. Is obviously we have enough money in to award the contract for the corridor. I still think there's going to be, and I don't have a specific need right now, but I'd like to dedicate that, and we have to spend in the next 2 years on New Orleans Square. I just think that there could potentially be other opportunities for making improvements in New Orleans Square area. And then secondly is that, as I've mentioned to all you individually, I think there's an opportunity for us to look at the next round of what improvements we want to make in the Rose District, and actually to combine that with other monies, and then try to come up with the projects that I've mentioned to you to actually try to continue keeping both of these areas, refreshing New Orleans Square and keeping the Rose District fresh. So these are some ideas that I have. I mean, by no means are these set in stone. If the council wants to reconsider this at another time, we can. This is just something I wanted to keep the money as pay as you go and in 3 different categories.
Yeah, because I was really wanting to see the big water filter that's a few $1 million. I don't know exactly how much it is, but that would help the whole city make our water taste better. I don't know the technical term. What is the technical term of our water filter that'll make our water taste better?
It's a biofilter,
Okay.
and that's between 10 and 20 million.
Does that take it?
Is that part of the membrane system out at the water treatment
Now,
facility?
this would be an additional filter, and it's like a carbon filter that's on your refrigerator, and it cleans out impurities, and one of the impurities it takes out is the taste and odors. It also removes all kinds of other contaminants too, so it's really a polishing filter as well as a taste and odor removal system. And we were looking at, we did a pilot study on it, it was very successful, but again, we're looking at sizing and the ultimate cost of that, and that was the range, was 10 to 20, but we still need to do some more work to look at that.
Thank you.
So let me ask you this, Chuck. Let's not have a problem without a solution. I mean, if obviously this isn't the place to use those funds, so we are looking at as a part of a future OWRB project or part of our water enhancement system for the future. I mean, let's talk to the council members about what your thoughts are.
Well, we have identified severe needs on the collection side, and so the majority of our funding right now for the next couple of years is going to the collection side, and it looks probably in 3 to 4 to 5 years, I think that'll balance out, and then we'll have some additional room to look at funding the biofilter project.
We're currently though looking at alternative sources as maybe a replacement for our primary source, and then the verdigris becomes a secondary source.
That's my next point.
Right, would we need to spend money on a filter, or would it be better suited on focusing on getting a new primary water source and then addressing the filtration issue?
Great question. Both of them are, and to me, that's something that needs to be reviewed and debated. We got HDR that's actually looking at that, because to me, if we could get a better source and not need the filters, and then only have the verdigris and the oxbow as a backup. So to me, that's going to be a part of the overall review about what's the best way to spend. Because I certainly wouldn't want to spend, let's say it's $15 million to kind of split everything in half, and then we go and get a better water source, and that may have not been needed. And so I think that we just have to be very deliberate. I think Chuck's managing the system as best he can, considering the water source, and I'd love to have those, Lisa. I kind of swallowed hard when he said 10 to 20. But I do think we are looking at it.
If we can get an alternative water source and that we don't need as much water treatment because of that, then I'd rather dump the 15 million into that conversion versus new filters.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I mean, I would like both, frankly, but I think the long-term solution might, I'm just thinking out loud.
I'm in agreement with you, council member, and I think all the council members are. We're going to have to spend the money. Let's make sure we spend it once. Let's measure twice, cut once type situation. Thanks, Chuck. Okay. All right, this time, unless there are any questions, I'm going to have it turned over to Rocky, and he's got the clicker, and he's going to go. Just remember, this is just something that council asked about 5 years ago, since we got the street maintenance tax repurposed. And so this is something the governing body requested that we've done every year, because it's very significant, and we hear most about road improvements.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, members of council. As you're aware, the street sales tax is a special revenue fund created for the purpose of improving, constructing, and maintaining city streets, sidewalks, and related stormwater improvements, including the acquisition and replacement of machinery, equipment, and materials, and including the installation of traffic control devices and signalization. The funding for this fund came from a 0.25% tax that was effective January 1st, 2017. This fund, on average, generates anywhere from $3.5 to $4 million, and I'm going to outline to you today about how we plan on utilizing these funds on specific projects. As I mentioned, one of the things that this fund can be used for is street signal projects. Currently, the city operates and maintains 87 traffic signal systems. 88 will come online soon when Aspen and Norfolk is energized. We operate and maintain 18 school zone signals. Currently, 33 of our intersections have LED street name signs. 45 of them have flashing yellow arrows, and we also maintain and operate 56 civil defense sirens. So some of the projects we identified in the street signal projects are to replace a damaged pole at 9th and Juneau. This was hit by a vehicle, and it's becoming structurally deficient, so we need to replace that as soon as possible. We relocate the traffic signal pole at West Omaha and North Aspen Avenue because it also has been hit several times, so we need to relocate that pole as well. Replace the control cabinet, video detection, and install flashing yellow arrows at 9th and New Orleans. The same thing at County Line in New Orleans as well. Replace the control cabinet and video detection at Highway 51 and Oneida Road. We have some detection issues there with the railroad, so we want to make sure that we can get traffic flowing through that intersection as soon as possible. The coordination signal controllers at 9th along the 9th Street corridor. This will help alleviate some of the problem, but it doesn't address the bigger impact of all the traffic and everything that's along that corridor, but it'll help synchronize those signals just a little bit better. Talking pedestrian signals at Elm and Kenosha. These are similar to the ones in Main Street that talk to you, that tell you to wait, and they count down. And same at Aspen and Houston Street as well. Next, I'm going to touch on our road projects. Back in 2016, the city hired a consultant to analyze our roadway network system. They drove every street and they came up with a bunch of data points to help us give us a tool on what projects we select for roadway work. We maintain over 1,200 lane miles of roadway. 75% of them are asphalt, 25% are concrete. This is one of the largest assets within the city. It's worth about $600 million to this day. And this is important right now where we sit as an overall PCI range anywhere from 0 to 100. The Broken Arrow sits at 70. So we're right there on the border of good and very good. The consultant had recommended that we spend $4.4 million annually to maintain that score of 70. So you can see this fund generates anywhere from $3.5 to $4 million. So based on that, we're operating in the hole. But we have other funding mechanisms in place that help us that will help us increase the score. Number one, we do a lot of the work in-house, and with the 2018 general obligation bond package, there's $2.5 million a year that are sold to help for residential rehabilitation. So you can see the combination about $7 million puts us over that $4.4 million threshold to improve our PCI score. So the projects we identify in this range are anywhere from 25 to 75. Anything below 25 would require total reconstruction, and anything above 75 we use preventative maintenance, so crack sealing, minimal work involved. Here's just a graph showing the importance that we spend our money there at the top of the graph so we can extend the life cycle of the pavement, so we don't dip down to that area where we get into reconstruction and we have to pump a lot of money into that roadway. As I mentioned earlier this month in my presentation, it costs an average about $1.4 million to reconstruct 1 lane mile. So here are some of the concrete panel repair projects we have identified. Earlier this year, we completed work in the Turtle Creek neighborhood. This is phase 2 of that to complete that neighborhood. Central Parks Estates, first edition. If you look there on the right, you'll see the PCI, those scores, 64 for Turtle Creek phase 2 and 66 for Central Park Estates. Also 6100 Center, it has a PCI of 50. The Vandiver East 6th edition, right now we're currently resurfacing Vandiver East 1 through 5. Vandiver East 6 is concrete, so we'll have that project wrapped up by the end of sometime in June, so this will finish out the Vandiver East subdivision with the concrete work with a PCI of 70. Next, I'll touch on the resurfacing projects that we've identified. East 73rd and 75th Street has a PCI of 37. Kenosha Crossing, a PCI of 39. South Elm Place from Tucson to Creek Turnpike. This is just that little piece right there in front of Walmart that's in bad shape, has a PCI of 45. Detroit Street from Date to Maine had a PCI of 52. Mountain View Addition had a PCI of 39. East Houston Street from Dallas to 9th Street. This will tie into the future widening of 81st Street from Lynn Lane to County Line in the future, so that had a PCI of 64. Omaha Street from 209th to Evans Road, that's out there by the dog pound, has a PCI of 72. 209th East Avenue from Dearborn or 41st Street to East 31st Street had a PCI of 59. Kenosha from 20th to County Line, right there in front of Chili's. That little stretch had a PCI of 57. The Windsor Estates Edition had a PCI of 54. And Elmwood Estates Edition has a PCI of 55. And then projects to be determined we put $750,000 in there. These are for unnecessary needs that may arise if a road fails or something, and we have this opportunity to create projects to identify those situations. So some of the miscellaneous work was the street markings. We refresh every arterial street once a year. We're currently about 90% way through that process for this current fiscal year, so the investment in that paint striping machine has been very valuable. Annual street maintenance, this occurs all year round at various locations. These are typically for base repair issues. Annual sidewalk maintenance to repair broken sidewalk along arterial streets. Alley improvements for $200,000. And as Mr. Spurgeon mentioned earlier, in STCI, there was money allocated for $250,000 for the pavement management report, and another $250,000 is here in the street sales tax fund. So this will help us. This will allow us to hire the consultant to reevaluate our roadway network system to see if our PCI range is increasing. The other thing that we're adding, and to Mr. Udi's point about sidewalks, is the original report just picked up streets. That's all it was. So this is part of our asset management system. So not only will we pick up streets this time, we're going to pick up all the curb and gutter. We're going to pick up sidewalks. So it'll tell us the condition of sidewalks and where there's gaps in sidewalks where we can fill in some of those areas. And then a couple projects here for our 2018 residential bond program is the Brentwood concrete panel replacement at $1 million. And Sun City Edition is the resurfacing project at $600,000. So overall, we're proposing a $4.7 million budget. $215,000 for street signals, $1.7 for concrete panel repair, about $2 million for resurfacing, $800,000 for miscellaneous. So the 4.7 combined with the 2.5 for residential rehab puts you over that $6 million threshold. Here's just a map for with the proposed projects. So as I mentioned earlier this month too, we spent almost $11.5 million in the last 4 years on street maintenance. We have done work in 50 neighborhoods, and in the street maintenance program alone, using street sales tax funds proposed for this upcoming fiscal year, we'll add another 5 neighborhoods, plus another 2 neighborhoods using the residential rehabilitation program. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I have 3 questions.
Yes, ma'am.
The street that was by the dog pound, is that what we call it? It said it was, I can't remember but it was a big amount. It was 72. So why did we choose that road versus other roads that seemingly there, I mean, it seems like there would be roads that will be less than 72.
There was this, like I said, our range is 25 to 75, but that is an arterial street too. So our focus primarily is to address arterial roads first, then collector roads, and then we venture into residential streets. We try to find a balance for all of those. But over the past year or two, over the winters, there's been significant base failure on those roads. So we want to make sure that we address it now before it gets too worse and PCI drops dramatically.
Okay. Did I see New Orleans by the events park on that list?
No, we're not doing any work.
So
That would not be part of Rocky's package.
That's a
okay,
bond.
that's not yours because that's not good. Okay,
It's a transportation project.
that's a transportation.
I can have Ethan come up because actually we should be going out to bid on that. So,
It's my understanding the city's gonna be responsible for not one side of a street, but a section of the street, and then the county's gonna take over.
yeah, yes, ma'am.
So we're okay.
You're
Sorry.
good.
We're working on an interlocal agreement with Wagner County to address not only that portion of the road, but the bridge 89, which is down on South County Line Road. But currently, we're in the process of relocating utilities along that stretch of New Orleans to Events Park. So as soon as that is done, we'll be ready to go out to bid. I'm anticipating that to happen probably in the next 60 days.
Okay. Because I'm sure y'all have seen it. There's like a ton of buzz on social media about this stretch of road. And I've responded to a lot of it. I've just copied and pasted stuff that Kenny has sent me. And it's a book, and people love it. Because then they feel like but I don't know if it's real or what, but there is talk out there that like the county commissioners have said different things than what we have said. Like they'll say, no, that's not right. Because I'll say something like exactly what we just said, and they'll say, no, that's not right. The Wagner County Commissioner told me this. So I know that we're right. I'm confident of it.
I'm going to have Kenny may want to comment on this.
Okay.
Because obviously there's a lot. You've got the city's got one lane going, which is going west, and the county commissioners have going east.
Mm-hmm.
And they were working on a project through INCOG getting a grant, because obviously they don't have the resources we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so we finally said, hey, let's put the brakes on this. Let's go have a conversation, because how could we actually take over both lanes, as the mayor just mentioned, and what could we exchange in order to make it equal? So let me have Kenny comment on where we're at. And Ethan, you can jump in too. Kenny?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Virgin. In December of last year, a few of the engineering and construction department people, along with Rocky Hinkle and myself, drove to Wagner County and met with Commissioner Kelly and Rachel Cooper, and we talked about several projects that were ongoing and how could we make sure that we were all working together and being on the same page. So as Ethan indicated, we will be bringing an agreement to the council, should be probably the second meeting in June, that will do some swapping out maintenance responsibilities and clarifying who does what. Now, specifically along New Orleans, where the vice mayor is talking, we actually own the north side of New Orleans. I'm going to say from, all the way to about 221st or 222nd. Wagner County has already acquired some right-of-way, moved some utilities from 215th to 222nd or 225th Evans Road. So part of our swap is going to be, we will own, operate, and maintain New Orleans from 209th to 215th, which is basically the far eastern side of the events park. We will build the full roadway width, operate and maintain it moving forward, and then Wagner County will take from 215th and do the remainder. As Ethan said, we should bid in June. I think we're actually scheduled to start construction the day after Scott Fest. We wanted to make sure that we got through that. So I'm going to say September 19th, 20th, somewhere in there, we should be in construction.
So to clarify, when the questions are asked, is it a final deal, based on what Kenny just said, that we will, from this point forward, be handling everything to 209th?
Yes, if the council approves the agreement that we're bringing for you in June.
Okay.
And Kenny, what are we swapping with them? What will they take over for us?
We're the winners here. They're going to take bridge number 89, I believe was the number that Ethan talked about, which is county line, way down there near Sanders Nursery, right. About 161st. Our standards require to raise the bridge, to pass the 100-year flow. The county has a little bit different standards, but the bigger thing is the county has county bridge monies that the cities do not have access to. So they actually have funds that they can build bridges that we don't have. We have to use our bonds. And then we have funds that can do roads that they're limited on maintenance. So we're going to pick up 209th from New Orleans, 101st south to about 114th or 115th, about a mile and a half. We share. The problem that we have right now is we share one side, they share the other. That makes no sense. So let's just take one side, they take, the whole road, and they'll go take another road. But they will get county line from 141st all the way to 161st, 2 miles.
So if council approves that agreement, and we could have started a little bit earlier, but the amount of traffic that we get from Scott Fest, plus you still have a whole lot of tournaments that are going on. It was just better to wait till Scott Fest was over, and then actually the tournaments at Challenger start to slow down after Labor Day. So we're going to delay it about 2 months before we actually start construction, because then it shouldn't be really any issues.
I think just being able to say that it's going to happen would be a plus.
We'll award the contract.
With some level of certainty.
I think the meeting's on the 19th of April, of July, so hopefully we'll award the contract in July or first meeting in August, and so we'll just actually, they'll be mobilizing, and we'll be able to say that we got a contract, and then then we can say a more definitive date when we're going to start.
Last question.
And this actually works well with the Wagner County schedule.
Street markings, are there, like when we do the street markings now, are they upgraded to where they're more, I don't know, reflective, to where you can see them better for a longer time than they've been in the past?
Well, one of the paint we use is typical in the industry. We do put beads down to help the reflectivity, but one of the things we are looking at is some neon paint to see how that, number one, responds to traffic, and to see if it meets our METCD specifications. So we're looking at other things that make the paint last a lot longer than it does now. But typically, you put that much traffic on a roadway, I mean, it's going to fade pretty quickly anyway.
Okay. Thank you. The questions are rocky. As you can see, there's a lot being planned for the upcoming fiscal year. Okay, moving on to the Municipal Utility Authority, affectionately known as BAMA. So for the Utility Authority, the proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year is $134,514,587. And this includes the expenditures, transfers out, ending fund balance, capital outlay, and debt service. Last year, the budget, this is actually a reduction over last year. And I'm going to have Tom talk a little bit about the decrease. Last year's, or the current year's budget was $143 million, or right at $144 million, which is a decrease of 6.5%. So Tom, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, sir. The decrease is actually last year as a result of last year we budgeted for our anticipated OWRB loan that we went out for in the fall. It was inclusive in last year's budget and capital outlay. And this year, we chose not to include that OWRB loan in the budget. And really two major reasons for that is that we're not sure of the exact sizing that we're going to be able to do because of the current interest rate market. And so as we get closer to when we will be able to bring that request and the loan to the authority, we will know better what that sizing will be. And so we did not include it at that time, and at this time. And so last year, that was $23 million that was inclusive in the 143, whereas the anticipated roughly 20 million this year is not included in the 134 million. So if you were comparing an apple to apples basis, you would be 154 million this year compared to the 143 last year.
Okay. This is just budget highlights. A rate increase is necessary to pay for ongoing operations, planned capital improvements, and OWRB we'll talk about during the manual of fees. Those are the rates which were approved last year, and we're asking your consideration for the same this year. The budget does include $2.6 million in pay-as-you-go capital work, and as Tom just mentioned, the proposed additional OWRB projects of 19.2.
And then with the existing loans that we currently have, that would be, once we approve the loans and would amend the budget at some point in the year for the new OWRB loans, we would then have a total of $58 million in OWRB funded projects within the amended fiscal year 23 budget.
Next couple of slides are just graphs of actually the revenues. Our water revenues 22%, sewers almost 14. This gives you an idea of where we get to receive the funds. Stormwater utility fee is about 7%. Sanitation, about a little over 6.
So this is pre-rate study.
Yes, sir.
The rate study may modify ultimately, or will that be for the next fiscal year?
What this budget includes as far as budgeted revenue is, as was on the previous slide, the 5.5 increase for water, the 7 for sewer, and the 9 for stormwater. We do not have a finalized rate model yet. That will be coming to the authority and the council later, but for budgetary purposes right now, that's what the budget was built on.
I just wanted that to be clear, because
Yeah.
we're looking at a rate study now that may impact what that assumption is based on, correct?
Yeah, I spoke to Kenny. We met yesterday and looked at, we're currently looking at the water, sewer, stormwater, and solid waste, and should have something around Labor Day.
Thank you.
So these are the expenses by the various divisions, departments within BAMA. That's in your packet, so you can see, it just gives you an idea of where the money goes. Quite a few slices. Next slide, once again, is just the different categories. Personnel makes up 16%. Your pay-as-you-go capital. These items are just some of the more expensive items that will be pursued if the budget is approved by council. Tractor and bat wing attachments for utilities.
That's the mowing that they come out.
Did you want that?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I like it.
It's
I wanted to highlight that.
I'm gonna say, it's a large silhouette that you shine a light on, right? Yeah. If we need extra help.
need extra help.
Yeah.
Yes. Lori and I like that. RMUA capital, replacement vehicles. I can tell you we're having some challenges with replacement vehicles. As you know, we just got 1 ambulance out of 3, and I'm concerned that it may take longer for us to get vehicles. And so we're looking at what options might be out there. The state contract, they're asking in some cases for us to let them know in the next few weeks about what we might order, because they're only going to order so many, and then that's it for a period of time. And these are the clean water loan projects, the $19 million that Tom talked about. These are all the projects. Kenny, do you want to mention anything about the projects that are here for the OWRB?
Yeah, real quickly, I think Chuck kind of touched on it a few minutes ago when he came up. So we're taking out about 19.5, just under $20 million worth of loan money. You'll find that almost 18.5 of that is related to the clean water. That's your wastewater, wastewater treatment collection system. So just as Chuck said, probably the next few years, we have got to focus a lot of our energy and our effort on fixing our collection system. Drinking water will be less than $1 million.
Anything you want to point out on this list, Kenny?
Probably a few. We've got a few lift stations. The first one's the Expressway lift station. That's right there by Hideaway and our public safety. Actually, it's where the public safety feeds. So everything right there in that area will feed that lift station. It needs to be rebuilt. I believe the trunk sewer, another phase is in there for County Line. Probably the bigger one, about halfway down, is Wagner County trunk sewer. That's actually the Zico line. If you'll remember, about a year or so ago, we had a collapse on the system. So we need to replace that system. It's been in probably since 1982, 84 range. Camina Villa, I think everybody knows where Camino Villa is. You see the big ticket item there. That system has been around since probably the 60s. It's clay tile. It's going to be a challenge to replace. This is where we get a lot of our I&I in the Adams Creek Northwest system, and we get some overflows. If we can reduce I&I and get a better system in, that'll be a big win for us. You can still see Adams Creek Northwest, Force Main, relocation. So we've got a little bit to relocate there.
Okay. Any questions on the proposed projects? Okay. Bless you. Here's some additional projects we have up for consideration. And then as Kenny mentioned, $870,000 for the safe water. So now moving into general bond obligation projects. Doing good on time here.
I do appreciate seeing the UAW connection funding from the previous.
Okay, and this slide right here, under the first bullet point, $49.3 million is currently in somewhere in the construction cycle, projects from the 2011, 14, and 2018 respectively bond projects. Just a couple of 2011 really smaller remains. It's really the 2014 and the 2018 and the proposed GO bond sale, which I had passed out to council members last week just to give you a snapshot of all the orange cones are going to be around town next year, next fiscal year, is $43 million. We had projected, I believe, between 32 and 33 million. I'm going to have to ask Cindy to mention the growth that we saw, why we're looking at 43. Cindy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, we because of the net assessed value, it gave us our bonding capacity up to $43 million. We have also incorporated in the $43 million a slight increase in the interest rates, but I wanted to mention both on the OWRB and the GO bonds, we are speeding that up to get them to close as soon as possible. As soon as July 1st rolls, we're going to apply for the OWRB, and then we are in the process now of doing all the preparation for the official statement for the GO bonds, because the plan is to bring that at the end of June to set the sell in the end of July, and maybe close in August, just so that we can maximize our capacity and just in case the interest rate does increase.
Thanks, Cindy. Okay, as council members know, there were 6 propositions, and in the package of the 43 million, this year there was a lot, this current year there's a lot of work being done by engineering and construction to work on design, right-of-way relocation. You can see there's quite a bit of money being proposed for road project widenings, many of those that are very important east-west projects. So you can see here Houston from Garnett to Olive is construction, then Houston from Olive to Aspen, then Washington from Olive to Aspen, and then widen Washington from 9th Street to 23rd. That's the right-of-way utilities. Resurfacing at Tucson from 1st to 9th Street. Construction 9th Street from Houston to Washington. 9th Street from Washington to New Orleans. That's in design. Widen 23rd Street from Omaha to Albany, and the replacement of the bridge in that same mile stretch. That's pretty significant work, very aggressive. There's also additional work being proposed from proposition number 1, widening 37th Street from Dearborn to Omaha. Residential street improvements, that's the money, that's where the money's coming from for the improvements Kenny talked about, Rocky talked about towards the end of the street maintenance program. Then $2 million for Broken Arrow County street projects. This is some funding we have available to try to come up with a solution for an alternate ingress-egress from the events park on the east side. And as I mentioned to all of you, Kenny is looking at options with Ethan's team about what's the most cost-effective way to try to actually create a road that actually functions for the park, as well as provide access off of Highway 51. $185,000 for various sidewalk improvements within the community. $2 million for downtown infrastructure improvements. And then, as you know, there was $9 million we have available in proposition number 1 for innovation district improvements. And we're asking council to sell 3.5 of that. We have some, we had already sold some before. I think that's probably more sufficient considering where we are in the process of determining exactly what the park's going to look like. And we wanted to focus on these road widening projects to get our traffic in and out of the community. Prop 2 is acquisition and equipping of a new fire truck or ambulance, depending on what is recommended. We also have some good projects in proposition number 3. Proposition number 4, there's going to be a pretty significant emphasis on some of our city facilities, much needed repair. Let's go back here. So that total is $43 million. And we're going to try to sell those as soon as we can to make sure we take advantage of the interest rates, which, as Cindy mentioned, could be a couple of months ahead of when we normally do. So, council members have any questions or thoughts on the package? It's a very robust package with heavy on streets this year. So, and obviously the one thing I'll ask Kenny to comment here, but with all those streets being done, we will be coordinating, so we're not going to tear up the entire west and south part of our community. You want to talk about that, Kenny?
Well, I was going to say you have Washington and Houston between Aspen and Olive. Don't do that at the same time.
Kenny, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I enjoy working for an astute boss and astute council. He picked up real quick on some of the challenges. But ironically, we are working, engineering is working with what can we move immediately with. The second phase of Washington, we can move immediately. And then Houston, we're actually looking at trying to do the 2 miles together, but we'll wait until we're done with Washington. So we are putting together a schedule, just like Mr. Spurgeon said, of how can we minimize the impact and disruption to our citizens.
Rose Garden, I mean, that's just the design, obviously, but they have to come up with the funds for.
They have an alternative. I think they've realized that their eyes were bigger than their stomach. No disrespect, okay. And they have an alternative design that they want to consider. Really, is more of a walking path. And actually, we've had a meeting with R.L. Shearers to come up with what a proposal from him on how to design this. And once I have that, I want to bring it to the council members. I think they've recognized the ability with the Arts and Innovation Center that we have, and the way things are going, is that they may have an alternative that actually would be much more palatable. So we're looking at that. We had a meeting, Michaela and I had a meeting with them recently where we talked about it, and then Charlie Bright and Michaela had met with R.L. Shearers to get a proposal for him. So, good question, Mayor. So, I just want to mention that, on pages 15 through 28, and I'm sure the council members will either have or will have a chance to take a look at it, I try to hit some of the highlights of the things that we're going to be working on, initiatives, projects, endeavors. In addition to that, I just want the council members to know is that, my style of leadership is very decentralized, and one where you hire the best and brightest, you set the curbs and let them go do their job. And the way that I work things is that I have 2 assistant city managers and I have 2 divisions. And then I have several departments that actually work directly for me, like legal, for example, communications. And so not only do we have the work plans that I have or the program of work of the higher level things in here, in addition to that, each one of the directors meets with their teams on some periodic basis, and they talk about the delivery of services that they're responsible to provide, and then they're looking at the best ways to provide those services, and then they're reporting up to their respective assistant city manager or myself, depending on the situation. And then I meet with Kenny and Norm weekly or as needed to basically get updates from them on what's happening in their respective divisions. with specific focusing on how we doing with personnel, what are you doing with your budget? I mean, I've got 6 or 8 questions that I ask, and my focusing on, for me, it's always more of a macro view of exactly where we are and keeping track of things that I think are important to the community and what the expectations are of the council. And it works very, very well most of the time. Obviously, there's things that happen that come up and we have to make adjustments. I mean, people leave. We're a living, breathing community, and things are going to happen, and we have to make adjustments. And I feel really good about the leadership team they have in place. They don't need a lot of hand-holding. They know what's expected most of the time, and sometimes I have to remind them. For the most part, they're excellent at knowing what is expected of them and going and doing their job. And then Kenny and Norm do a great job of keeping me posted, because really I try to pride myself on knowing what's going on with the organization with a certain level. With 900 employees and a $311 million budget, you really have to rely upon your leaders, and I'm very proud of the ones that we have that do a very good job of understanding, try to keep down the number of surprises, that they know that there really shouldn't be very many surprises, and trying to be more proactive or reactively proactive to meeting the expectations of the citizens, and I'm just very proud of what they do. So what I presented on pages 15 through 28 are really just a high level focusing on communications, public safety, BAMA, streets and roads, economic development, but that's just a snapshot, and I just wanted everyone to hear that that's not the only thing that we do. Everything that we do really focuses on customer service, trying to do a really good job, but these are just the higher level things. I know that they all do a great job of meeting with their teams, and the information for the most part cascades down on what is expected, but it's always good to hear council's expectations, because when you give direction, it's my responsibility to implement that as a body, your direction. I think it's always important that you comment on how we're doing and where we can do better, because obviously I think everybody here understands the same thing as we want to serve. We want to serve the community as best we can and take that direction and turn that into action. So if anybody has any questions on the higher level work plan, as you can see, we're very aggressive. We're going to do a lot of roads this year. Economic development, I still think that New Orleans Square has so much potential, and we're starting to see that. The TIF district, as I mentioned to you, you've got other entities that are interested in developing in there, and so we will be presenting a request for proposal probably later this summer to actually go out to a proposal for probably 4 to 5 acres of that area. The Rose District has tremendous potential. We still don't have an entertainment venue down there, and I would like to make that a priority, because I think that's only going to extend the hours that there's folks down there actually enjoying the quality of life. There's other opportunities all over the community, as Larry mentioned, and trying to stay on top of those. And so I'll be glad to answer any questions now, or if you've had a chance to go through the proposed plan of work. And that's it, Mayor, members of council. I mean, that's the first part. And if council would like to, we'll go ahead and take a break and eat, and then when we finish up, we'll get back on the second half of the budget. Okay.
Recommend you take a formal recess.
Okay.
Make a motion for recess.
I have a motion and second. Roll call.
Yes.
Udi? Parks? Gillespie?
Yes.
Wimpy?
Yes.
About ready to get started?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I see Chief Moore's arrived. Okay. And I see Chief Berryhill.
You didn't have to say that.
We're going to ask him if everything
Just ask him pretty good.
Yeah. Everything going out okay?
Look at you.
Not yet, Mayor. I just recommend that you make a short announcement that we're back in session following the brief recess.
Okay. We're going to call the meeting back into session following a brief recess.
So I was going to ask the chief if he could, either he or Chief Bennett can come forward, just sit up the table in case there are any questions, because really, I only have a few slides I want to present for each of the public safety departments, and then to just have a conversation with the city council members that they may have about police and fire. So, just to get started, and we're doing the police first. We'll start with the police sales tax fund and the revenue sections, and these are the revenues that we take in that we contribute to the police fund. And the sales tax, the 2.8 million, is the dedicated percentage that we used from the vision that was repurposed. The other is just other expenses transfer from the general fund. That is the funds that Tom was referring to, the 36.7% that we have to transfer by ordinance. And just a quick note is that that ordinance, and we had Trevor check on this just to make sure, is that only the vote of the people could change that. Whenever the voters in November of 2015 agreed to repurpose the 2025 vision tax to those three categories, police, fire, and street maintenance, it was very clear that the only way to change they were contributing at least that amount, you have to go back to the vote of the people. So that guarantees that there's always going to be essentially approximately 37% of all the general fund revenues available for the police. And then the transfer in from the 911. So the total revenues available for this year based on the projections is $32,982,818. Now the expenses total $32,786,330, which in essence, what we're going to be taking in, there's about $200,000 under what we have available without going into the fund that we have. And right now, we're estimating that year end, and we always talk about year end being 6/30/23 in this case, the fund balance we're projecting for the police fund should have just over $14 million in it. And that's in my executive message. And if you remember, the reason why it's $14 million, it's really a couple of reasons. First and foremost is the decision was made to hire 5 police officers a year for a certain number of years. So therefore, you had the 5 officers, but the amount we were collecting was higher. And then then 5 more. And so that's why you have it there. Plus, because of the 2 really good years that we had, the last couple of years, we were able to put in some additional funds into the police fund. So right now we're looking at a budget that's just a couple $100,000 under what's available, which is really good.
What would be some of the other services for $1 million, just for instance?
Chief, you want to speak to those? What's in your budget?
Some of that, it could be, the radio system for the entire city is maintained in my budget. Some of the other services, like the janitorial service for this entire complex, is under my budget, and the animal shelter and the courthouse. So that could be some of that.
And if I can interject, it's also, the other services are also including the utilities.
Telephone.
Yeah.
Is another large one there.
Yeah, at the 911 center.
Utilities.
There's a big expense,
PSO.
telephones.
Thank you.
So you have a complete breakdown of what's being proposed for the police department inside the budget book. Once again, we're just under what we believe we'll have in revenue. Okay, at this time, I just wanted the chief and I've got a few comments. I want the chief to address anything that he would like for the council to address. But really, it's just, obviously, the 2 largest departments in our budget are public safety. And obviously, we've all talked about it in terms of the 5 council members and myself repeatedly about the importance of having a safe community. To me, it's the beginning. It's where you start. And if you don't take care of your public safety, it's going to affect it's like the pebble in the pond. It can affect so many other things because of the ripples that will actually be caused by that. We do know, though, that there is a cost to providing that level of public safety. It's expensive. And you have to make sure, especially with the collective bargaining that we have to do every year, every other year, there are obligations that we have to meet with regard to our collective bargaining agreement. And so in order to retain our officers and to attract officers, we have to make sure that we have good starting wages, we have opportunities for advancement, and those are outlined in our collective bargaining agreement. And as the council members know, we have a very good working relationship with the FOP, with regard to the labor managements that are needed, that successful relationship we have in order to move the department forward. So one of the things that we talked about during the budget process was the need for additional officers. We already talked about previously the fact that we're going to be adding 5 dispatchers. So that's, on the back end, that's extremely important. You need those dispatchers. We right now currently have 157 sworn positions, and there are only 146. 46, or is that correct, Chief?
Yes.
So we have 11. And I think you all understand the challenges of, you just can't hire somebody today and they start working the street. There's an academy they have to go through, and there's field training and so forth. And so after talking with Norm, with the chief, and also with the union, we felt like before we go and add any officers, let's put together a short-term plan that actually fills those 11 positions. And it's not as easy as anyone would think, and I'm going to have the chief talk about that, but I try to keep it simple from my mind. What would we have to do to come up with 11 positions when you have an ebb and flow of you're hiring people, but you're also having people retire? And so we came up with a way to do that, especially with the fact that by the end of the next fiscal year, we could see additional retirements as a result of some positive changes that have been made in the pension system, that we could lose some additional officers, and we lose about 5 to 7 officers approximately a year, I understand. So I talked to the chief and see if his operations team could handle holding 2 academies per year for the next 2 fiscal years. Now, the maximum number of officers that I understand is we could put 12 people in the academy if we could find 12 people, and that's no guarantee is that when we do a recruitment is that we're going to be able to find 12 people that meet the what I would call the expectations we have for individuals that would want to become a Broken Arrow police officer. So if we assume that we're going to be able to find 12, then you would actually have two academies or 24 additional officers, and we can field train those individuals. So with that, Chief, why don't you talk a little bit about the recruitment and what your thoughts are about the 2 academies?
So breaking it down, we really need to hire 24 people by November 2024 to stay just even, just to get up to our authorized strength. The reason that's occurring, like the city manager said, was we've got some retirements coming up. So the way that system works is if you're in the police pension and you're at the age of 50 or older and you've got more than 25, if you got more than 20 years, anything beyond 20, you can retire and take a cash lump sum. What that's causing with 5 years ago, the pension system had a really big year between a COLA and the stock market. And so there's a lot of people out there that are approaching or at retirement age that we're probably on the fence on, do I stay, do I leave? And so if they don't leave by May 2023, it's almost like they're being penalized. If they don't leave, they almost have to work 2.5 more years to make up for not leaving. So there's going to be, and it's not just us, it's across the state, and it's a financial decision that across the state, everybody's going to be losing a lot of senior leadership because of this phenomenon. So it was just, everything hit at once. So that drop back plan is going to cause us to really, just to get back to our authorized strength, we have to hire 24 people. And so that becomes difficult. And since we're on camera, I want to go ahead and say that our joinbapd.com is our recruitment website. So if we can get that out there. So in hiring 24 people, that sounds great. But like the city manager said, there's some logistical issues with that because it's about a year process normally. And we're going to try to see if we can streamline that because the academy is 6 months long. We run our own academy. It's a 12-week FTO after that, field training. And then you've got all the lead up, the recruitment, the testing, all that kind of good stuff. So the problem is you have FTOs, field training officers, that train them out in the field. Some of those are our leaders of our departments, so they're also academy instructors. And so we're trying to add FTOs because you can't really overlap too much because the same people that are training our officers out in the field are the same people that might be instructing in some of the academies. And so what we had to do is we moved an additional position to the academy to accommodate that many people going through. We're trying to streamline our process so we don't overlap too much and we can handle that many people. Now, that's given that we can find 12 people and 12 people, back to back to back by 2024. So that is going to create some challenges for us. Because of that, we're also trying to hire reserve officers. And when I say hire, they're volunteers. And so we have an academy coordinator that once we open up those applications, which I believe they're open now, if we can get 10, we'll run an academy. That person, another person out of the field, will be dedicated to a 38-week training program to train the reserve officers. So we have to front load the support for hiring 24 people now, knowing that our staffing is going to go down over the next 2 years So it is a big challenge, but I think we're up to that. But the big key for us is going to be really the recruitment over the next couple of years. And like you said, we've got great benefits, equipment, and things like that. So I'm hopeful, but we'll see what happens.
The other thing I wanted to mention, there's no doubt in my mind at some point we're going to have to add additional police officers. And I think before we go and do that, because of the challenges that go along with hiring themselves, let's get up to the 157 and let the chief evaluate with his team where we're at operationally. And it's going to take a couple of years to do that. The other thing that I've mentioned to council members is the fact that we have had a meeting with the Broken Arrow Public School District leadership, specifically the superintendent and his staff, with regard to them creating a campus police or to contributing to the fact that we have 5 police officers that dedicate their time to our school districts. And that was a very positive conversation. We're going to have another meeting probably sometime in June or July of this year. And they're very close to, I believe, creating a campus police. And they have enough people now, they're very close that they could actually do that. They've just asked us for a transition period to make that happen. So if you look at 146 is what we have, and then you have 5 individuals that are focused on the schools, you know, that we essentially have only about 141 officers that are available. So if in fact within 2 years we could bring 4 of those 5 officers back, that would be a blessing for the department and the city. And so we're looking at multiple levels to try to make sure that we get up to 157 and take a look at that. And I feel pretty comfortable that we can do that. There's also been some discussions which we're exploring, is that between the academies, if we did find someone that we thought would be a good police officer, is there a way that we could hire them for a short period of time so we don't lose them and get them into another process? We're still exploring that, and it's been mentioned to me is that there's things we can do, and we're going to be looking at that as a part of the budget. Because if somebody, for example, I'm not talking about, I wouldn't want to bring somebody on in a zero position, 0 level for 6 months. But if we're there a couple of months before academy starts and they've gone through it and the chief feels comfortable, we might do that just to keep them and not lose that person. So we're going to be looking at that. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question, and this is also police and fire. I know tell me what the process is if someone is currently a police officer in another city and they want to apply at Broken Arrow. Do they have to go through the entire academy process again?
So we're one of 5 or 6 academy cities. We run our own police academy. Numerous years ago, we did some lateral transfers. And what we found was if we don't train people the Broken Arrow way from day one, we don't get the same product we do as hiring them and making them all go through the same academy the same way, because our training program is 3 months longer than what's mandated by the state. And from day one, they learn Broken Arrow streets, Broken Arrow reports, how we want them to deal with the public. So what we found is that if we have an academy class, everybody going through, and we have officers that have come from other agencies who have gone through CLEAT, are still willing to come over here because they want to work here and go through our 6-month academy. So the question is not whether or not it can be done, it's just we get a better product by going from block 1 and going forward.
And I understand it, but it's like I feel like we have such a hard time hiring. Is there a way, I mean, what do they have to do? Like if they have rank at another agency, do they lose that totally?
Yeah,
when
so
they
the way that works, our collective bargaining unit requires that someone is like an officer for so long before they can test for sergeant. It requires their Broken Arrow sergeant for so long before they can test for captain. Now, if they're working another agency and they're in the state pension system, their time in the pension isn't lost. So if they've got 5 years someplace else and they come here, they're starting year 6 in the pension. Fortunately, our pay is good enough that unless they're 6 or 7 years into a career someplace else, they're going to quickly catch back up to where they were. But I can tell you that our past academy classes, you know, we're getting the cream of the crop, and we really, word of mouth and professional reputation is how you get good applicants. And we're not fighting for the good applicants because people want to be here because they can live here, they can raise their kids here, they can work here. It's a good combination altogether.
That's what I was going to say. My understanding is we didn't have trouble finding people. It's just we had trouble being able to get staffed up and trained.
So we normally hire anywhere from 8 to 10 as our normal academy class.
Right.
We've never tried to hire that well. We did several years ago. So the question right now is, because of the retirement bump we were talking about, everybody across the state is scrambling
Right.
for the same number of people. But I can tell you that we've got several officers here whose parents are in law enforcement, and they've advised their kids, you know, go work for Broken Arrow, and that's the biggest compliment you can get, is someone trusting you with their kids. And so we've got the reputation, we've got the equipment, we've got the pay. It's just a question of getting out there and finding the people. So, you know, one of the things we're doing is on the back of everybody's business card, there's a QR code now, and you scan it and it goes straight to our recruitment website. So it's just not a question of will we find good people, it's can we find 12 good people in back-to-back academies. And logistically, we can handle 12 to 13, maybe 14 people in a training cycle, but for our size, that's a big percentage of only being 157. So when you're hiring 12 people, that's a big load on the department.
The other thing I was curious about, and I think at one point we did, do we have an auxiliary program of any kind for
Reserve officers?
Reserve officers, things like that?
Yes. We have approximately 8 reserve officers now. A lot of them have, you know, were on when I got on back in '94, so they've moved on. So we have applications out there. We've filmed a recruitment video, and we are looking for reserve officers now. Now, a reserve officer has to go through a 38-week academy because they only go 1 out a week. They're all professionals doing something else. A couple of times it's twice on a Saturday also. And once they get through, they have the same powers as a regular police officer, but they're volunteers. And they're required to work X number of hours every month, bearing in mind that they all have jobs. And so we normally use them for special events. We've got 2 or 3 that help us out with transporting prisoners. It unties evening shift from that responsibility. A lot of times you see them at parades and festivals and things like that.
Rooster Days, they used to.
Yes, but there is a financial cost for that because we have to outfit them, their weapon, their uniform. We have to replace their vest every 5 years, radios, and so there is a financial cost of that. But once they get on, and we have to train them every year to make sure they're current, but they are a force multiplier. So we're looking for anywhere from 10 to 15 if we can get them.
Chief, what are the challenges? Any of the challenges you want to share with the council members?
So the plan put together actually with Captain Teener, who happens to be the FOP president, he's over dispatch right now, is he came up with a plan of 4 dispatchers and 1 supervisor. Oddly enough, the dispatch environment these days are all wanting to go to 12-hour shifts, which we've been doing that in the jail for a while, which surprised me because I would not want to work 12 hours in the highly stressed atmosphere like they got back there. But apparently that's the thing. And they're hearing from other dispatchers that if y'all had 12-hour shifts, we would apply to Broken Arrow because the pay is good, but we don't want to give up our 12-hour shifts. And what that allows is that allows them to have 4 days off and then 3 days off alternating. And so they're willing to work longer hours to have more time off in between. And so that's the same schedule we've been running in the jail for a while. But to make that work, we have to have 5 additional bodies. 1 supervisor to make sure we have adequate supervision, and then 4 additional dispatchers. And what that'll do, and the reason we need so many dispatchers is because if you look over the past 20 years, sworn personnel for police have grown 74%, fire's grown 80%, and the population's grown 52%, as opposed to dispatch that has not grown about 30%, and our overtime budget over the last 20 years has grown 342%. So obviously we need to hire more dispatchers. But I think if we get to the point where we have enough in there, I think our retention rate will be better. It'll allow us to actually train someone and not be working a console and train someone at the same time, which is not an ideal atmosphere. We're one of the few agencies in Oklahoma that our dispatch center does police, fire, medical, and pro QA all at the same time. Most agencies don't do that. But I think that will allow us to retain people better. I think it'll attract other dispatchers from other agencies because I do believe our pay is competitive at the current rate. So that's a challenge for us. So I think that'll be a positive improvement for dispatch, which is our first point of contact with the public.
So if you do get the 4 dispatchers and the supervisor, then you will go to the 12-hour days?
Yes, yes. First, we have to hire them, get them all trained up, and then we'll go through a shift bid process and decide what squad is going where. But I think it's a move in the positive direction. I was hesitant about the jail also, but it seemed to have worked out really well, and they like it. So I have no reason to believe that the same won't be true for dispatch. So with these challenges, there are also opportunities. So we're going to have to be inventive with 24 people in the hiring cycle, with FTOs training people and more people at the training center. We're going to have to maximize and leverage our technology. So one of the things that we'll be looking at is maximizing some of our surveillance equipment in case we have a spike in crime in certain places. Our new software program that's not deployed yet has a citizen crime report system, which is online. So what that allows is retailers for petty larceny, or if you need to make a report for the purposes of insurance where there's no suspect and there's no evidence to be collected, you can go online and make the report. So that eliminates the need for us to dispatch an officer, tie up dispatch, have that person drive across 15 to 20 minutes, depending on traffic in this town, maybe 30 if you go up Lynn Lane, to get somewhere, take the report, and then go back. So that should speed up the process, which will also maximize some of our deployments out there. The new software system will allow real-time crime analysis, geospatial. Currently, it's not really built for that because the system's about 24 years old. It'll allow a watch commander to draw a polygon around a particular area of town and see real crime data in real time to know where we should be deploying our people a little bit smarter. So that'll be of assistance. I do know that with the upgrades of our signalizations, they're going to have our traffic intersections, they're going to have connectivity to the internet. That's going to do a couple of things for us. All of our vehicles from the year 2020 and newer actually have, because your clock updates in your car, you don't really know how that happens, it's hitting the internet. So what we can do is go towards the turning the signal lights green for an officer going in emergency mode at a further distance in a quicker amount of time. Right now we use opticoms, which is basically a strobe light that's timed and it's line of sight. And so a lot of times, if you're going faster than 40 miles an hour in an emergency call, you're going to outrun that opticom. So that new technology in the cars will allow us to get there quicker. Additionally, we have in the budget currently cameras. They're not speed cameras. They're more for catching stolen cars, cars that are suspects in something. So we're going to try to maximize as much as we can that we have on hand and have budget for to use some of the technology to help out with who we have deployed in the field, given this large training cycle that we're going to be in.
Did you receive the stuff from Sheriff Elliott for the
Yeah, my tech guy is looking at that, and so we just need to make sure it's going to fit for us.
Sure.
I mean, the connectivity is there, which is one thing that's been long overdue. So that opens up a lot of options for us as far as cameras. Be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any other questions for the chief? Okay, thank you, Brandon.
All right.
Thank you, Chief Bennett. So, anybody have any questions about emergency management? Jamie's here. He's always good to talk to. So I didn't know if there was anything that anybody had a question about emergency management. Obviously, we've got the grant looking at sirens, and he's constantly working on a disaster preparedness. We've had several exercises this year focusing on things that could really happen to our community. So I didn't know if there's anybody wanted anything to hear from Jamie.
Well, emergency management, they have their own line item, right? They have their own budget, or are they under the police department? Would that be part of the other under the police department?
They're in the police department.
So would that be the other part of the?
Well, it's under there, but he's actually reports to Kenny Schwab,
Yeah.
but he's embedded with us because he's in our building. So.
Yeah.
But like, where's his money? Like, where's his money line?
Storm sirens are in general services, and some of the stuff is in our budget too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a mix.
Yeah, Kenny recommended to me not too long ago, because Jamie works with so many of the departments, is that he actually report directly to Kenny, but he's still housed over here. So that way he's got access to all of the directors. So anything you want to add, Jamie? Anything you want to share with the council? Okay. All right. So for the police sales tax, the capital specifically is cars, $800,000 for the cars plus $200 proposed from ARPA. This intersection license plate reader which is an incredible tool for the police department to be able to use. Miscellaneous equipment, animal shelter improvements, and then a golf cart and a trailer for very special events. Very special.
No. Did you mean various special events?
Various. That's what I meant, various.
That's what I heard, but, okay. The police cars, I know you mentioned earlier we were having some difficulties getting vehicles. Is that looped up in that problem as well?
It could be. Chief can speak more specifically, but yeah, generally speaking.
Are we staying with the Chevrolet products, or are we looking at?
So we were actually leaning towards, we've been buying Durangos and
Okay.
Chargers for a while. I believe Dodge is going to quit making the Chargers completely in 2024, 2025.
Ford's not making cars at all anymore, except the Mustang.
There's an issue with the Ford on the state bid. So the only thing that's actually out there currently is, and the Durangos have been pulled back, I think just the shortage of cars in general. Bids opened up for the Chevy Tahoe, and so we don't really know what we're going to get. So the vendors that are on state bid have made their orders to the manufacturer. Depending on what they get is what would be available to us. The negative side of that is, we budget for so many cars based off of the car we think we're going to get. The Tahoes are probably a little bit more expensive, so we may have said we're going to buy 15 cars, we may buy 14, depending on the price of the car, and so we're kind of at the mercy of what comes out. Whether that's a chip shortage or it's just manufacturer supply chain, so we really don't know. The money's there, so we just need to see what actually comes out on state bid and what's available to the local car dealers that have made their request to the manufacturer.
So, and that was my question, is not so much the funding of it, but just being able to get a new squad car.
Yeah, I've been begging people to please drive carefully because you may not have a car if you wreck your car. So it's just a supply issue, and hopefully that's temporary.
Can't we pull one of the Crown Victorias out of that? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Please don't mention those.
I think there's an underground storage of them, and because that's why I think.
Hey, I drove one for 10 years. This is the best car I ever owned.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things, like the Tesla we bought several years ago. It was $50,000. It was cheaper than a regular police car once we outfitted it because we didn't put a cage in it. Now that same car is like $70,000, so it's not feasible. So we don't really know what the price of the vehicles will be until the vendors actually receive the orders from the manufacturer. And so at that point, we'll know whether or not it's going to be a crisis or not.
I know. Well, that's been my concern is not so much the ability to pay for the police cars, but being able to actually get one.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, just like the fire department's suffering with the ambulances, the orders that were made, we aren't there yet, so we really need to wait and see what happens.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a question about the license plate reader for the intersections. Can you talk to us about what that does?
So we're asking for the money. We have not picked them in particular at this point. There are several different vendors out there, and the technology is basically the same thing you see on the turnpike. These are high-speed cameras that can read a license plate as you drive through the intersection.
So what are we going to do with that information?
So that information specifically will be for anything that's entered into NCIC as a stolen vehicle. If it reads it, it pops up, it alerts us. If we are looking for a specific car, we'll use it. These are not going to be speed enforcement cameras. That's not what they're designed to do.
It's not to find out who has or hasn't paid their tag.
No.
Okay.
Well,
and it's not.
let's work on that.
Yeah. So, and it's not. We won't pick a vendor that shares the information with anybody else. It's for law enforcement purposes only. It's not for speed enforcement.
Because Counselor Ford's correct. I think, and my mind goes there. It's like, well, okay, this is little big brother. You're reading my tag. Why do you need that? I mean, I know why, but why do you need to film it? I think that's the.
And
so how do we reassure people that we're not,
We are audited, so everything we keep, every database we keep, we have to account for that. Anytime you run a vehicle through OLETs to check to see if it's stolen, there's an audit trail for that, and you have to sign for that running of the tag. And so this will have an audit trail to make sure it's not used for the wrong reasons. But it's more about how you set it up and what vendor you use and what they're set up for. So ours will be for law enforcement purposes only. Criminal investigations and stolen vehicles.
So will that read the paper tags that we have so many of around here that people use markers?
The problem with the paper tag, well, paper tags are not entered into the system because it's a paper tag. It's just they rip it off, so it's not really going to be in the database. But it's up to the officers to look at those paper tags and see if they're more than 30 days out of date. The fact that it's a paper tag, they're going to look at it and they can see if it's out of date or not.
Chief, you want to talk about cameras, the body cameras, anything you want to share with how it's working?
So the body cameras have actually turned out really well. I mean, my only complaint is the storage is expensive, but that's just the price of doing business. I can tell you that everything I've seen from the body cameras is negating complaints is what it's done. A lot of times we'll call people up and say, a supervisor will call someone back and say, we have this complaint, would you like to come up here and view the body camera footage with me, and they hang up. So, and the officers actually like it. We're actually looking at moving towards some of the connectivity in the new cars, actually, where if you turn on the lights and siren, it can activate the body cameras around the car if you've forgotten to, because you have to push it to turn it on. But if you've got lights and siren on, probably you have a critical scene, and the car will turn them on for you, so you don't have to think about it. So, but so far it's been really good. It's one of those things. It is an investigative tool because it's used in court. It's one of the first things the DA's office asks for is if there's body camera footage. For me personally, what I like about it is it really protects the officers from false claims, and that's what we're seeing.
Okay, thank you, Chief. I jump back here because I wanted just to mention to council something is that revenues. So you've got the sales tax that we collect on that dedicated sales tax, and then there is the transfer we make from the general fund to come up with the 32.9 that we need to basically to pay for the 32.7. So we have a collective bargaining agreement with the FOP, and we're currently in the second year, and it includes an increase of pay that we agreed to for both years. The thing that I get concerned about is that you look at the $32 million budget and you look at what it costs to adequately fund the police department, and we have $14 million left in our fund. And if everything comes in, hopefully the conservative approach on sales tax, it'll be much higher, which means we would put more money into the fund balance would be over 14.3 next June of 2023. Built into the collective bargaining agreement is that even if we didn't give an increase in salary for the FOP, they still have steps, and so there's going to be an increase in the cost of personnel because as long as the city agrees to give the steps. And so I show you this number and to tell you that we have $14 million. At some point we are going to have to go to the voters and ask them to consider public safety districts. And my focus has been is to have aggressive economic development efforts that increase the amount of people that come to Broken Arrow to shop, or more opportunities to shop local. So we increase our sales tax, and to extend the life of that fund as long as we can without having to go to our voters. And Cindy watches that closely for me. Basically monthly, about as we look at all the sales tax figures, looks at the budget for the police department, for the fire department, because they're so heavily dependent on the sales tax. But at some point we are going to have to go to the voters and ask for them for the public safety districts, which will be an increase in property taxes. And they're going to want to know how we're going to spend that money. 1 mil generates right now about $1 million a year, and so the 5 mils, which is the maximum right now that you could ask your voters for in Broken Arrow, if it was passed tomorrow, would generate approximately $5 million. Now that's going to go up incrementally as the assessed value of the community goes up, but that at some point that's going to be needed. And so I really want to focus on making sure we take care of our folks in public safety, all of our employees. But at some point we are going to need that, and I'm certainly hoping to try to extend this out to where we wouldn't need it till sometime between 2027 and 2030, I should say.
Question about the public safety districts. Do we plan, when we do decide to go to the voters, will we be coordinating with other municipalities to try to do it all at the same time, or is that normal? Or
Yes, that's a discussion we have at Cities United, and it was just passed last year, and so everyone's talking about when they need to do it. And I think everyone's like us, they'd like to not have to, because number one, it is a tax increase.
Right.
However, I think there's no doubt in my mind that if we presented the right plan, that our voters would support it. So there would be hopefully a concerted effort to try for everyone to go together, and then just the timing of it, like we did with the vision repurposing, and most of the cities actually did that. Some did it in October, a few did it before us, a few did it with us, and a few did it after. So.
Make sure that we all had the same educated campaign.
Right.
To inform the voters, but
Yeah.
everyone's got different election cycles too, so.
Well, we want all of our tax to be going up at the same time. If we don't want ours to be the one that does without anybody else.
The challenge that we have, and I don't envy myself or the council, is, you know, you initially would think it would be just $2.5 million to the fire and $2.5 million to the police, except the police have dispatchers and jailers, okay? And you saw that both departments had well over $1 million in capital. And what's not going to change is the request for capital every year. I mean, how do we afford to continue to appropriate $1 million a year for police vehicles? And everybody competes for that $9 million. And if I really could afford it, I wouldn't be taking any of the fund, of the sales tax fund, to do any capital. I'd like to figure out how to do it all within the STCI, which leaves us more money in the fund for operations. Okay, so when we have this discussion about the public safety difference, there really needs to be a lot of discussion about how would be best to divide that up. Because some communities, and council may even decide, you put before the voters, that it is 50% of it would go to the fire and 50% would go to the police. I think that some portion of that should be for capital. But those are discussions we're going to have, and I think we're going to have to present a plan to the community just to go and say, hey, we need 5 mills just to pay for, I think we'd have a problem. We're going to have a plan, and that plan may include additional personnel, which means how do you pay for those long term? So my goal is to continue to be conservative, at the same time make sure we have good negotiations, and understanding is that we've discussed this with both union presidents, and all this information is available to them to look at. So these are real dollars. There could come a point where at some point, even though we give 36.7 and 30 point something to the fire, we may be required to contribute something above that in order to meet the demands, and that's a decision, because right now we're living within those means.
The 911 money, can that be paid? Can salaries be paid out of that, or just equipment salaries
Yes.
too?
A portion of great question, council member. The portion of the 911 is actually going to help us pay for the additional dispatchers.
Okay.
I think there might be less than $100,000. I mean, based on what we take in, that million we're just above that, so we're okay.
Okay.
Did I get that right, Tom?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Chief. Okay, moving into fire sales, the same scenario here. The revenue, sales tax, 2.8, because they both departments got the same percentages respectively from the vision repurposing, and the remainder went to street maintenance. Others, 11,000 transfers from the general fund, 24 million. Total revenues, 27 million, 137,630. And total expenses, 25 million, 842. So actually, we are well under what we believe we're going to take in, which means that, once again, whatever is left over at the end of the year goes right back into the fund. So it's not like, and I just want to be clear about that, we're obligated. So it's not like if either chief has $500,000 left over, that's not redistributed to some other department. That actually goes right back into the fund and stays there for use in future budgets for police or fire, whichever department. In this case, all of the capital for the fire department is in STCI. So we're very fortunate, really. We just have to, every year I look at it as everyone has to justify. I know Brandon would like to have so many cars per year, and I know Chief would like to have so many other things in his department, but I really try to make sure that I limit what each of those can have, because I have so many other needs from the other departments that need dump trucks, or the parks need vehicles or backhoes and so forth. So one more thing. The anticipated, according to Cindy, and she told me that the estimated balance for the fire fund at the end of 6/30/23 should be $9,120,000. So once again, we have a relatively healthy fire fund as a result of the receipts and the pandemic. The money's coming in much above what we'd anticipated. Okay, at this time, I'm going to offer the chief the same opportunity to talk a little bit about what's going on in the fire department and to share with you a lot of discussions we've had. And as a council members, just everybody remembers, a couple of months ago, obviously there's lots of communications about Squad 8 and standing up ambulances, calling in mutual aid and so forth. And so all of you received a presentation. And I've had a couple of council members share with me that at some point this summer, this fall, they'd like for the fire chief to come and give that presentation to all the council members, and we're willing to do that. Because there may be important for everyone to hear, some of the challenge. The last couple of years, there has been an increase in number of calls, and in the budget, I am recommending that we overhire by 6 additional firefighter paramedics in order to help with the staffing within the department. And so I was going to have the chief run through that and then answer questions the council members may have.
So the city manager asked me to just kind of start out with just a brief overview for the public that may not know exactly. The fire department does cover all of the city limits plus about 50 square miles outside the city limits. So we cover approximately 100 square miles, obviously providing both fire and EMS transport. This up here is the fence line that we cover and shows each of our 7 fire stations within the city limits. 7 fire stations. Each of those fire stations has both a fire truck and an ambulance, and then one station there, Central, right there at Kenosha and Maine, actually has 2 fire trucks in it. So we have 8 full-time fire trucks and 7 full-time ambulances spread across 7 fire stations. Over the last couple years, as the council knows, we've also had an additional 8th ambulance that we have stood up during peak hours. The pandemic put a nice tax on our system, and so to accommodate long delays at the hospitals and the increase in call volume that we had, we used some CARES money and some ARPA money to help stand up an additional ambulance, and we called it Squad 8. So it was the 8th ambulance in the city, and we've done that intermittently. It's actually stood up right now, and we've done that intermittently, used those overtime dollars and staffing to be able to stand up that additional truck. And what we've called peak hours. During the daytime hours, citizens are out, and so naturally that's when our call volume is the highest. And so during that same time frame, we've stood up an extra ambulance. That's the current 4-minute response times from each fire station is what's shaded in red up there. Those are GIS maps that show the actual speed limits of the roads and the roads that are there. It's a little bit misleading because if there's not a road built there, right, like down where new Fire Station 3 is, there's a lot of pastures. And so it looks like there's not some red space where we could get to, but there are no roads there. So you can kind of imagine that what we're trying to do with our fire stations is have that map totally covered in red, indicating we can get everywhere in our response time within about 4 minutes from the time our men and women roll out of the fire station. So our current staffing levels, I wonder if this works. Our current staffing levels are 173. 173 people, men and women of our department, are what we're budgeted for on an annual basis. 159 of them, kind of working backwards, 159 of those firefighters are frontline personnel. Those are the men and women on the streets, they're in the fire trucks, they're in the ambulances that work on 24 on, 48 off, 365 days a year. And then 14 staff positions support those positions. Those are administrative persons like myself. Myself and Chief Stewart are included in 173. And that makes for 53 people per shift. And what I want to walk you through is kind of, the city manager mentioned that we're considering overhiring by 6 persons, and what I'm going to kind of walk you through is why. Each day we have, based on our contract, we have an agreement that we will staff a minimum staffing of 40 persons in the city every day, spread across those 7 fire stations to provide fire and EMS service to the citizens. 14 persons are on those 7 ambulances, and this does not include Squad 8 because it is not a part of our minimum staffing policy. It is intermittent as we need it. And so this is the minimum staffing It's comprised of 14 people on our ambulances, 24 people on the fire trucks, and then we have an EMS person that navigates the city and helps at local hospitals and does all kinds of things to help keep our EMS operations afloat. And then a battalion chief who is a 24-hour-a-day employee who supervises all of the field operations personnel. I've got too many clickers. There we go. So with 53 people on each shift, and that is based on our authorized strength. The total number of people we're allowed to hire would give us 53 per shift. That means I don't have any retirements between the time I hire them and they're going to work on the street. That would be the maximum we're allowed to have. So that seems like a good cushion when our minimum staffing level is 40. That would be 13 people before I get into what we call callback overtime. Because we're always required to have 40 people on duty all the time, I have to have them here to be able to provide the service to our citizens. Not only is it to provide service to our citizens, but it's contractually agreed upon. If at any time we drop below 40 persons, we have to call in somebody off duty, and they'll come in and work at a rate of time and a half. And sometimes if we get in dire straits, we will force them to come in and work at time and a half. Well, it seems like a good cushion, but due to other contractual provisions like vacation, occasionally we've got some folks on sick leave. We send 2 to 3 people to paramedic school that are our employees. That falls under training. And then we've got military, and unfortunately we have a few folks that get injured from time to time. And so due to contractual provisions, we average right about 14 people off per shift. So that's sets us up for an unsuccessful situation where when we are at 100% of our authorized budgeted strength, we only have 53 per shift and I've got 14 off, which puts us in a position where almost every single day we have one person in callback overtime. So we're paying one person to come in to work overtime just to reach that level of 40. And this is an average. There are some days when we don't have a full bank of vacation, and then there are other days when we have a full bank of vacation, and instead of having 1 or 2 off on sick, we have 7 off on sick leave. So the average is about 14 people off per shift. And again, this doesn't account for peak hours units that we want to do. This is just to get us to those 7 ambulances, 8 fire trucks, the battalion chief, and these individuals here. So we tried to put together something to illustrate kind of what we're talking about here.
What does it cost if you have to bring somebody in to work 24 hours?
Sure. Again, on the average, because we may bring in a probationary firefighter, or we may bring in a battalion chief, and those salaries are going to be significantly different. But on average, we figure about $1,000 a day to bring in one person. So if we're -1, it's $365,000 a year. And again, -1 means I haven't had any retirements. We have never been there until really this last year, because by the time I hire somebody in the academy and we get to full strength, we get to 173 persons day 1 of the academy. That's what we hired for. The academy is 4 or 5 months, much like the police chiefs, so those 4 or 5 month period, we have about a 5 to 7 attrition rate a year. We lose 5 to 7 people a year. 3 or 4 of those happen during the academy. So once the individuals hit the streets trained and ready to go, we may already be at 52 or 51 per shift. And so it puts us in this eternal deficit. If this line, this red line, represents, you can call it a minimum staffing level, or you can call it an overtime level. Right now, we hire, this peak here would represent hiring our persons, and then we have a retirement, and then immediately we're already into this kind of overtime level where we're below minimum staffing levels and we're paying overtime here. And then we go through a hiring process over a 6 months to 9 month period. We hire again, they come out of academy, but then it only lasts a week or 2, if that, and then we're back into this deficit again because we only had 53 per shift to start with, and so it puts us in a little bit of trouble. What Mr. Spurgeon referenced earlier was overhiring by 6 persons, which would take us to a authorized strength of 179. Actually, I misspoke. The authorized strength would stay at 173, but he would give us permission to overhire by 6, which would give us 179 people. And we believe, and this is sort of a theoretical model, but we believe what that will do is will put us in a model more like this, where we hire here and we're actually above the minimum staffing levels. We're not in the need for overtime on an everyday basis. That will run for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and about the time that the academy starts, we'll be here. During the academy, we would need overtime to get those individuals through the academy, and then they come out of the academy and we go back to here, and that would run another 6 months, and we would run that kind of on an annual schedule. We typically start a new fiscal year July 1. We typically have a hiring process that goes on from May through October, and we hire an academy class in January. The overhiring concept plays a little bit on the savings in salaries here are applied to new hires here. So I've got some vacancies here. We're not paying the high wages of a very, very senior employee because they just retired. We capture those and save them in the budget, and then we apply them here in January, halfway through the year, to extra people to help get us through that kind of ebb and flow. Questions on that? That's a lot.
So how many going into the academy then?
If the plan were approved,
If we're overhiring by 6, we still have extra, right? That's overhiring.
sure. So if we overhire by 6, we will do 6 plus whatever the attrition rate is, how many ever vacancies I have. So currently, I'm going to lean a little bit. Currently, I think we're -1. We're just right at flush or -1 because we actually, Mr. Spurgeon gave us the ability to implement this in October. And so from October 1 of this year, when we hired our last academy class, until whatever it is now, May, we've had 6 retirements. And so we are kind of piloting the program right now that we're asking to pilot next year as well, and give us a couple years here of data to show, is it working or not? It's a little bit skewed because during this whole same time we have stood up additional trucks, being Squad 8. This plan is really just to try to keep us solvent at the minimum staffing levels that we're at now. We've increased the minimum staffing levels in the 7 years that I've been here by 6? By
Twice.
6?
We've increased it by 6, through two through negotiations and 1 through an arbitrator's decision.
And at the same time, we gave, through negotiations, we gave out more vacation. So what we did was that minimum staffing level and the benefits level that we've so graciously given have increased the amount of people required to do the job, but we didn't increase the amount of people we were hiring to do the job. So it made very, very thin margins, as we kind of have illustrated here, on what we're able to do to make it all happen.
Do we normally have an academy?
Annually, just about. We missed a year during the pandemic just because we didn't think it was real wise, not knowing what was going to happen. But
We have usually how many in the academy?
we always have hired at least the vacancies that are open.
Okay.
And like I said, we're either at 0 or -1 today. So given these 6 July 1 in this budget, or given the permission to overhire, I anticipate we'll lose 5 more between now and January 1. January 1, we'll see how short we are, so we'll see how far below 173 we are. Let's say we're at 170. We'll hire 3 people plus the 6, so we'll have an academy class of 9.
Okay. So in the past, we've done academies for like 3 people? Like if we had 3 vacancies, we've done an academy?
I don't remember anything that long.
No, since I've been here, we've had, don't quote me, 20, 25, 7, 8, 9,
16.
16.
Yeah, there's never,
Okay.
not since I've been here,
Okay. 'Cause
Yeah.
Vice Mayor.
That's what
we
I
did
was,
something
that's
that-
what wasn't making sense. I'm like,
No.
I didn't even think we'd ever done one with just 6. So saying 6 plus vacancies doesn't make, it's not computing in my head, so that wasn't making sense to me. But
We can't predict the vacancies very well. guesstimate on historical data, and we know we lose 5 to 7 a year.
Okay.
And we try to run, because of how lean we are, we try to run, and actually, Mr. Spurgeon's been really good to us, and we have gone around and asked our individuals, you know, we start an academy in February. We've gone to our entire department in January and said, are you thinking about retiring any time between now and the time the academy graduates? Because if you're going to retire, I can think of 2 captains off the top of my head that came in and said, yes, I plan on retiring in May. And Mr. Spurgeon gave us permission to go ahead and fill their vacancy, which kind of artificially did this overhiring by 1 or 2 here or there that helped us kind of tolerate that.
So, I know you keep calling it overhiring, but to me that doesn't seem like an accurate terminology. It looks like you're hiring to anticipate the fulfilling of empty vacant spots. It's not really overhiring, because we're not going to have a bunch of people sitting around.
I call it over, you're right, I call it overhiring the number of people we have authorized.
Right,
you
but
can-
I don't view it that way. We're hiring what we need in anticipation of what we will need.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't see it that way either.
Sure, we're hiring for more than we're budgeting for. Is that
I think
fair?
that's a jargon. That's a jargon y'all use. I mean, I've heard that, like like I've heard it from other people in the union and stuff, that word overhire. And I do not know I still don't understand what it means. But
Let me put it this way. I'll need $24 million to hire 173 people July 1.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to hire 179 people with $24 million January 1. If you want me to be able to hire those same 179 people July 1, I'm going to need $25 million. Is that fair?
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a little bit on, at any given point in time, point of view. I mean, at the day, the overhire comes from at the day the academy starts, instead of the 173 authorized individuals on the City of Broken Arrow payroll, we have 179. And so we are technically overhired for the number of authorizations at that point in time. But the way the chief explained it, it may be, you know, a flip of a coin, and we're only 5 over 3 weeks from then, until you get down to the point where you cross the line and they have graduated and are out there.
I'm sure there's any ways to look at it. In my entire career, anytime you have a certain number of positions that you're authorized, if you hire more than that, the term has always been used, overhiring.
yeah.
Is
It just makes it sound like, to a lay person, it sounds like you're hiring more than you need when you overhire. That's that
Yeah.
it
And to
sounds
me,
like.
we're not
and I
hiring
don't
more
think
than we
that's
need.
the case.
I know, that's just a term that we've used, and but you are correct, is we're trying to anticipate how many vacancies we're going to have, fill those, and the overhires, in order to accommodate, to making sure we stay as close as we can to the authorized number. And the biggest challenge we've had is just through negotiations, is when you negotiate, it's just that. And we've had to negotiate an increase when we actually did we stood up the 7th squad.
Engine and squad.
Engine and squad, we basically went up by 2.
3 for the engine, 2 for the
Okay.
squad.
And then there was one other time we agreed to it, and then in an arbitration, it's our package or theirs. And that's when it went from 38 to 40. And so you know, there's no question in my mind that if we look at doing, adding additional stations or a change in the model, that I wouldn't be surprised if union doesn't want to see an increase in the minimum manning as well, which creates challenges for us because of the number of people that could be off.
Do the union or the firefighters, what are their view on the overtime? Do they want overtime? Do they want to be called back in? And I think this, when you overhire, you're trying to cut back on the number of hours that you're having to spend, time and a half. What's their stand on it?
I think the first question is, how much do you anticipate we're going to spend in overtime this year?
This year I anticipate 1.2 million.
In overtime?
Just in our overtime budget. And so we'll be shifting the burden out of our overtime budget into payroll theoretically with this. So we think that we budgeted $750,000 roughly in overtime. We've spent $1.2 million this year. To your question exactly, when overtime is extremely saturated, we've coined a term called overtime saturation. When you get it as much as you want it, it becomes burdensome. And especially when we get into mandatory overtime. And so when we're at that slide where we're down at this far end here, and everybody can work, I've got 7 people, 1 for every station on callback overtime, and you can get all you want anytime you want, you don't want it. And then you get to the point where we're requiring, especially to stand up the peak hours unit, we're requiring mandatory overtime, and that's not super popular. It's part of their job description, it's part of your role as a firefighter to come in when needed, but it is not popular. And so when it's overtime saturation, it's not popular. However, at the other end of the spectrum, when we're here for a minute, everybody wants overtime. I want to work overtime when I need some disposable cash. It's not a pensionable wage, so it's not affecting their long-term pension. But when I need some disposable cash, I want to be able to come in and work it, but I don't want to have to work it twice a week or something like that.
And Johnny, just, I mean, my conversations with quite a few firefighters is that exactly what he said. It's just gotten very, it wears you out. I mean, think about it. Any of us in a normal job, if we are called in to work overtime constantly, we don't want to do it, much less the type of position that this is. And so I think it has become where they don't answer the phone.
Well,
Where
and
they
just
accidentally don't see the phone.
different
ring.
companies, different individuals look at it differently, and when you come in and you're going to hire an extra number of people, more than the budget, excuse me, then you do that to cut down on overtime. And you're hoping that, and probably it will come out cheaper for the city or for the fire department to do it that way.
Yes, sir. That's the theory, that we spend 600, round numbers, we spend $600,000 on 6 payroll salaries, and it cuts $500,000 out of the overtime budget or somewhere in there. We're not naive to think that it's going to be dollar for dollar by any means, but we do think that it will be somewhat of a wash. But the benefit is reduced firefighter fatigue. We'll have more opportunities should we be up in that area here. We'll have more opportunities for firefighters to participate in extra training activities. Up in this portion here is also opportunities to stand up additional units at no cost to the city, like Squad 8, like a special events truck, those types of things. So there are some benefits, not so tangible or monetary, but we do think there'll be benefits by not wearing our firefighters out for sure.
What is your challenge to fill a class?
We're not having the same unfortunate challenges that the police service are. I was just with 25 other cities talking about this earlier today, and the police are seeing a significant trouble. We're not. We're pulling people from Tulsa Fire with 5 and 6 years on to the counselors. I don't remember whose question earlier, Vice Mayor's. Yeah. Vice Mayor, we pulled an individual from Tulsa Fire that had been there 5-6 years and came over here and obviously went to the bottom, went back through our academy class. So we're doing nationwide recruiting now, and we have a great setup that we're a clinical site. And so we get a lot of young, fresh faces coming through our department trying to get their EMT, and we get to know better recruiters than our own frontline personnel. So we kind of have a built-in recruiting system here in the city. We're not struggling with that. I don't know exactly how many applications. We've got over 100 applications. It's fair to say over 100 for a current class. I haven't reviewed any of them yet. I just know that we've got about 100.
I was going to ask that question too.
Yeah.
I haven't reviewed any of them yet. They're at the incipient phases. They've got a long way to go before we would start looking at that. We do obviously train the contractual requirement that we train two per shift. So we train 6 EMTs. If we hire an EMT, and we're really focused on hiring quality people with high character, high moral value, integrity. We can train people to be paramedics, and so we have an internal program for that. And this year, the city manager has allowed us to not only do 2 per shift, but we've actually increased that to 3 per shift. So we're getting ready to send 8 or 9 through paramedic school starting in August to even raise our numbers higher. And those are going to be trained here locally, and then they'll come do their thing with us, and we pay for that for all of our employees. We've put a cap on it of 2, but we've exceeded that cap here recently.
Are we still partnering with Tulsa Community College? Isn't that who it was? Tulsa Community College, or was it Tulsa Tech?
Tulsa Community College.
Tulsa Community College.
Okay.
The program, no. The program has not, it's kind of fizzled out.
We did our part.
Their entire Tulsa Fire, their entire program kind of collapsed over there. Their entire fire protection program kind of collapsed a little bit, or at least the hands-on portion that we were piloting with them. So they still do have a paramedic school that is robust, but they've lost their training facilities and all of that. They had some sort of agreement with Tulsa Fire that imploded, and TCC washed their hands of it and gave it to Tulsa's fire department. Here's a $30 million facility.
So I'm glad you touched on the paramedics, Jeremy, because obviously that was something that the union approached a couple of council members about the need for more paramedics. You know, and obviously, you know, my direction to Jeremy is we're not going to hire somebody that just because they have a paramedic's license. We hope that they have the intangibles that you can't teach to go along with that paramedic license, because, you know, we have a reputation of hiring really good people, and I just don't think we hire somebody just because they just have an acronym. Plus, I'm pretty proud the fact we've got a lot of folks that actually want to go through, that current employees that want to go through and get their license.
Yeah, almost everybody out of the last class, which was 16 people, are showing interest in it and very excited about participating. They don't actually come off their probationary period until October, but the class started in August, and we said, if you want to go, we're going to send you. So we're kind of expediting their process.
Now, that's going to, there's a cause and effect to that. Obviously, by me removing that cap temporarily to get more people means that we could actually go into that overtime situation because we're going to fall below minimum manning. But I feel like it's worth that in order to get the additional paramedics, because I know it's going to be temporary. So that's the ebb and flow of trying to manage the department, because if there's only 2 ways you're going to get more paramedics: either hire more, or get those that are currently working for the department to decide they want to, which we pay for it, we give them the time to do it, and then there's additional compensation whenever they complete it. Is that correct, Chief?
That's correct.
Okay.
$10,000 to $12,000 once they complete it that they'll receive immediately, and then there's some stipends. We reimburse them. They pay for the class, and then we reimburse them totally once they pass the class. So the city's not out any money until they pass.
If they don't pass, are they out the money?
Yes.
Kind of an incentive, huh?
Yeah.
It's a strong incentive.
Well, you know, I will say this, that on April 4th, we had a really good labor management meeting, and the union president and I believe all the members of the executive committee were there, along with both chiefs, Norm and myself, and we talked about a lot of things. One of them we talked about was the non-emergency transports. That is something that I know several of the council members, if not all of you, heard about the concern. We had a meeting, or there was a meeting held on the 16th, a week ago yesterday, or I believe it's the 16th,
Yes, sir.
to begin the discussion of determining what that definition is, and then what the next steps would be to determine what we are going to run and what we're not going to run, or we're actually going to work with someone else to run. And so those conversations have started, and I believe the next meeting is going to be probably sometime in later part of June. I know the chiefs are supposed to do some research, and then they're going to continue the discussions. The other thing I wanted to mention was the union presented information about the chief, to follow up on the chief's presentation regarding the number of runs and the impact on those runs, and just where we're at. And I thought it was really good information. And I believe it in my mind, it supported what the chief was saying, is we are reaching a point where we're going to need additional firefighters. And in that presentation, which you all saw and we can give again, is there is a point where with the number of calls, we're going to need additional people, or we're going to need to call mutual aid. And there's some of the things we have to figure out as a city and a department. What model do we want to work? You know, there's one bond, for example, there's one station left in the bond package, and we're going to have to make a decision. Council has the final decision is what to do with that remaining funds for that station. Do we replace, for example, do you replace an old one with a new station somewhere in the northeast, sort of northwest part of the city, or do you look at putting an 8 station out near the training center where the response times are slower? And you know, both the chief and the unions have positions on that, and I have to listen to both of those. And you know, the union, I'm not going to argue their point, but you know, they believe in very general terms is if you have 8 stations, there should be 9 companies. And the Ludwig report says there should be a station in the northwest part of our city. And the question becomes, you know, what is we going to do? And I did not put that as requested by the union. I did not put that station in the budget this year. But at some point, we're going to have to make that decision on what to do with that last station, and exactly what model we're going to run. And my position is really very simple. And this is the last thing. Okay. I just want to say this. My closing comments on public safety is because I want to get to 157, and then also the goal is to overhire. We got a question about the definition of overhire to effectively evaluate operations. For me, I look at this. I want us to have the best model in both the police and fire with a number of people to protect our city within the dollars we have available. And at some point, there's going to be a clash in terms of what funds we have versus what the cost is, and that's something we're looking at every year. And there's going to be more and more focus every year on that, because we're going to have to do something with that. In the case of the fire, that 8th station, what do we do with it? Do we replace a station, or do we add a station?
Didn't we just dump a bunch of money into one, though?
We've done some renovations to it.
I mean, it was not inconsequential sums, as I recall.
In 2016 or 17, we put about $100,000, give or take, into Station 1 for some mold remediation.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, it's structurally sound, one would hope at this point, given that.
Yeah.
And,
It is.
and our trucks fit in it.
Most of our trucks fit in it. It is structurally sound. If I'm weighing in, it would be Station 8, because there's a need for our citizens there, and the current Station 1 is usable for a decade, at least until the next bond issue for sure. So I would be a proponent of getting all citizens a 4-minute response time before we start rebuilding that one that is acceptable. Yeah, we went back to that. So these citizens that live right up in this area, I would like to see them have a 4-minute response time before I start redoing the station that's here in the middle of town, or doubling up fire trucks at any station.
Yeah.
What's the response time now? Sorry, Tony. What's the response time now out there?
In this area, this is the perimeter here you see in red represents 4 minutes. So anything outside of that is going to be greater than 4 minutes. It would be speculation, but I think we're approaching 8 or 9 minutes as we get up to here. There's a huge amount of growth going on right in here. And if we were to drop a fire station, I always say near the training center, it would give us 4-minute response times in this entire area. Plus, my busiest fire station in town is Station 6 at Neen-Highest Park. Not only would we have great response times for all of our citizens that live in this area, great highway access to help that fire truck get all the way around here, it would also help the firefighters with the workload that they're experiencing at Station 6, which
Wouldn't
is...
it improve the northwest part, because 6 would be able to address northwest issues because we have one in the northeast?
Yes, and Tulsa's dropping a fire station right in here.
You know when that's going to happen, Jeremy?
Summer.
So they
I
are.
mean, it's almost built.
And they have the personnel.
Yes, I don't know how, or I don't know where they're relocating or what they're doing, but from what I understand, late summer, early fall, they're going to have a fire station in here. We can continue conversations with them about their auto aid for us into our city in these areas.
Because we're doing a lot for them in that area on the other side of the fence line.
We
south of Omaha, is it?
Right here, north of this blue line, we help them out tremendously.
Or north of Omaha, I'm sorry.
When they drop their fire station here, it should help us. our workload should go down tremendously. We help them right now because they're.
And I don't begrudge helping them, I'm just pointing out we do, so I mean, I would think that would be.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I think, if it's not in this budget, and I think we have to, at some point, discuss how we look at Life Ride and how that's offered and how that's structured. Because I know it was sold to our citizens as an optional thing, but I also know that if people are opting out, I think we're just going to have to look at that at some point as to what that program looks like, whether it continues in its current iteration or whether we amend it to address, because I don't think we're breaking even at this point.
Nowhere near. That's in manual fees.
Okay.
So you're right on point.
Getting there.
So I promised the chief and I promised the union president that we would try to figure out what the best model is together. Ultimately, it's my responsibility to make that determination under your guidance, or you may be required. But to me, I'm interested in having the model that works best for our city, and I'm trying to take in all information so I can try to make an informed decision. And I just want you all to be aware that, I did not include that station there as requested, and that we are having discussions about non-emergency transports, and there is some concerns about how we're standing up the 8th ambulance, and so we're trying to work through, in my opinion, those things and still make sure we provide great service to our citizens. So this is something that the conversation we'll be continuing this conversation.
I had a comment I was going to make back when we was talking about when we was going to locate a future fire station, is that normally we go ahead and hire an outside company that comes in and makes recommendations. Will we do that before that decision's made? Or are we going by what they had already recommended?
Yes, sir. In the Ludwig report that the council approved in 2016, it did say in the next 10 years, you will need to add a station in this north area. So we're still working off of that last recommendation. It was recommended for 3 and 7 to move where they did, and then it had future considerations was you should really consider something up in the northwest portion of the town, and so that's really why you hear me say Station 8 and why we have that option in this bond.
And I certainly concur with that. I want to make sure that their input is in this because of, used to, I can remember we would build a fire station because that's where we had property. We had a park there, so let's use that park property. And in the last few years, we've come in and put it in strategically, safety, insurance-wise, and make sure we continue following after their guidance to look at anyway.
I agree, Counselor, and
the benefit is we have land in that area.
I do say the training center because we have land, but it also, and I have another slide that I didn't put in this presentation that shows the GIS dropover of that. And so we're looking at this, the Ludwig report used GIS studies, the speed limits on the roads, and that's exactly what he used. And trying to say this, I'll be complimentary. My Assistant Chief Mark Stewart's GIS skills are so much better than the Ludwig report. We have leaped ahead in our technology and our ability to use it, and I don't think we need to go out for an additional report because he's able to produce the kind of data and information here internally, and he's produced this map for us and the map of where Station 8 would go if it was dropped on the training center property. And we're actually doing soil tests right now on the training center property to see if it's even feasible, because we know the police department had a little bit of a struggle with a building that was closer to the dump and even if it's big enough. So I'm not saying the training center will be the site, but we know it's about the area of town that both the Ludwig report done and Chief Steward's GIS work is done to show that's about the area of town where we need to build a fire station to accommodate the 4-minute response times.
Michael, can we get the email to us, or at least me? I don't know if they want to mess with the rest of my colleagues want to mess with it, but can we get all the slides you've shown today, beginning to end, so that I can compare?
Absolutely.
Because I was trying to compare the numbers. And okay, thanks.
I'll have Cricket get it out to everybody.
Except for Johnny, you know.
So.
Johnny doesn't want it.
Yeah.
No, I've got it right here. I have to carry this thing around. I want to look at it.
So once again, I appreciate Chief Barry Hills and Chief Moore's comments. Obviously, public safety is, to me, it doesn't need to say much more than the fact it's extremely important, and that we have to continue to make sure that we protect our city, whether it's police, fire, emergency management. And I think that we do a great job with what we have. We've got some challenges with personnel and getting those positions, and I think these 2 pilot programs are going to tell us and get us to where we need to be, and then we can evaluate. Because I'd like to see the police department get to 157, that including working with the school district to get those police officers back, and then get the additional folks that we need to get us up to 55, and let's see what happens and evaluate there, and then come back and update the council on where we're at during next budget session with probably some short updates in between. So, okay. Chiefs, thank you. Okay, at this time, the manual fees, the last area of the budget, I'm going to ask Tom to actually walk us through this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So the manual fees, it probably won't take more than an hour and 25 minutes or so.
You have 30.
I'm teasing. I don't need 30. The initial part is actually very short.
Stuart's got skills, Cook's got jokes.
Yeah. So in the manual fees, which is effective October 1st every year, so this is the draft issue, and that's actually a rogue slide. That was, I had never seen that slide before. There are, yeah, I did. It is inclusive of some small increases in our development fees, including inspections, the annexation costs, comprehensive plan, and zoning fees. And Larry and I had a conversation about this earlier, about the basis for these increases, and it's really much like you see below with the cemetery, that there was an increase just based on the CPI. Pretty much the same with the development fees. It's just to keep up with our additional cost, we have had small increases in the development fees. And just by way of example, a typical inspection has gone from $27 to $30. So the fees weren't the increases weren't large, but they are just to keep up with the additional costs. As we discussed also previously, utility rates currently in the manual fees draft are the same as that was approved for October 1st of last year, pending the finalization and adoption of the rate model. So we will not update the utility fees, the utility rates in the manual fees until we have adopted a rate model. As I said before, the cemetery fees are up 2%, and that's just based on the CPI. A number of years ago, we had not raised our cemetery fees in several years, and we actually had a very large increase. And at that time, the council directed us to keep track with the cost and have small adjustments to our cemetery fees, rather than what at the time was probably a 60% adjustment. And then there are a few changes in the under the medical services portion, and those are just to reflect actual drug costs, and those recommendations come to us from EMSMC, which is our third-party provider of billing. And then next is Life Ride, and I believe Mr. Spurgeon.
Larry, anything you want to ask about your request? Want to mention about why?
in comparison to our fellow communities within the metro area, our rates are actually relatively low. They're not the lowest, but they're relatively low in comparison to our neighbors to the north and the Wausau. Our permit here is for a plumbing permit is roughly about $66, where our friends to the north, they charge $75. But in comparison to like Jinx, they charge $50. So at $66, we're showing the relatively cost to us, to our inspectors, and I will say that, as always, Broken Arrow sets the standard for the metropolitan area for the inspection, the highest inspection quality that we have. So again, it's, as Tom said, this is just a general CPI change associated with it.
Thanks, Larry.
No problem.
There's some, like the commercial burn permit jumped quite a bit. Is there reasons for, went from 87 to 150?
Is that mine or yours? Commercial burn permit?
It's in miscellaneous, so. Residential solar panel went from 63 to 150.
I think we were
Those
trying to
did
keep,
come.
yeah, that was all mine, and so we were
Yeah.
trying to keep them, I mean, we don't have that many of those permits, and so again, the industry standard, and that's, on the solar panel one I can speak more closely to, is that the industry standard for those costs are generally associated with the installation associated with it, just like new construction, it's a percentage, but instead of doing that, we wanted to have a flat rate. So that's the reason why we went from 83 to 150, was because if we went to the percentage rate as we do for everything else, it would have cost closer to like $300 for us to do that. So that's why we went to the 150 rate. And so in doing the comparison to the rest of those, especially for the concerns that citizens have been raising recently for burning, we have been out there more often, especially on the south side, enforcing those and making sure that they're done. So the cost associated with that burn permit usually is, because it's general citizens are not doing it, is the home builders, the developers that are. And so for us to go out there more often, we need to be able to recoup those costs associated with it. So if we're going 83 to 150 was our reasoning for that one.
I guess I didn't realize that as a resident, I could get, I guess, a burn permit
Mhm.
to like just burn some stuff in my backyard.
Yeah, if you wanted to burn leaves or something like that, just,
Okay.
That doesn't include like if you have a fire pit that's like
No.
on a
No.
thing. I'm like, do I have to?
I think you have to have like marshmallow sticks if you're cooking right.
Yes.
Someone told me
Yes.
as long as you have marshmallow sticks there, you're good.
Yeah.
Be cooking.
Okay.
Something tells me that's not right.
For outdoor fireplaces, you have to have a screen that, or the appropriate construction of it that would limit any sparks from leaving the confines of something, some sort of enclosure screen or something like that.
I've told you my burn story.
I know, I was actually,
That was pretty fun.
a few years ago, a church I attended decided to have a bonfire and didn't realize the rules, and I drove out there and saw it and said, "Oh, my dear Lord."
And you turned your church in?
I did not. But I warned them that they needed to be careful.
yes.
Thank goodness you didn't turn it around.
Okay, Life Ride. Implemented, thank you, Larry. Implemented in 2015 as a voluntary program, Life Ride is a program where Broken Arrow residents are charged a monthly fee to cover all of the out-of-pocket costs when emergency ambulance service care is provided by Broken Arrow Fire Department EMS. Initially, the fee was established at $5.45 per month, which was the same as the IMSA rate charged by Tulsa residents. So at that time, everyone was signed up initially, and then some customers have made the decision to unenroll, and then as new homes were built, some folks made the decision not to enroll. And the way it works right now, if we make a run, and you're in Life Ride, and it cost us $1,000 for that run, and your insurance pays $800, then we accept the $800 and we go on down the road. If you're not in Life Ride and we make a run and that's $1,000, we will actually pursue getting that $1,000. If they only pay $800, then we still go after the $200 because we want the whole $1,000. So right now, we have 39, as of when this was put together, the city has 39,526 utility customers with participation in LifeRide at 68.7%. There's been a steady decrease in the percentage of utility customers participating in LifeRide from 90.4, 76.2, all the way down to the 68.7. Currently, there are 12,056 customers who have opted out of LifeRide program. A report completed by Crawford Associates analyzed our LifeRide program and advised that expenditures for ambulance services far exceed revenues. If I remember correctly, from when the last time we had Crawford Associates do this, that in order to come up with a charge to cover what it cost, the charge would have to be around $11, and that was for the police. That was for the fire budget a couple of years ago. So obviously that charge would be a little bit higher today. So we did some research, and in order to maintain the present service levels, it's my recommendation we have a discussion and consider requiring all residents to participate in the program, which is consistent with what Councilmember Udi just said 10 minutes ago. Do we keep the current model, or do we consider amending the model that we're using? So, for example, if we were to change the program and amend the ordinance to require all 12,056 to be on there, that would generate $545 times 12,000 times 12 months, $700-some thousand. However, we have been collecting a certain amount of money each year from those people that are not on it, and so it's an estimate. But finance estimated that after you do your total and then subtract what you wouldn't be collecting from the runs, there would still be about a $400,000 increase in revenues to the city for the first year. Then every year you would have that, and then we could have Crawford and Associates analyze to see what is needed, because Trevor's made it pretty clear is that there's an Attorney General's opinion about what a utility is and what you can do, and that if we have this charge, it's easily defendable, but whatever we charge, we have to be able to justify why we're charging that. And there's many communities around the state that are charging it. I don't know how they base theirs, but for us, we need to always have Crawford do the analysis to determine, so we can say is that we have a justification of why we're charging this. Okay? So we can easily say the $545 that the 68% are paying is legitimate, because we know the cost of EMS services is much higher than that. So my concern is when you look at the cost of the EMS services for the city, you look at that, and second, you look at that 68.7 is going to continue to go down. And that's a concern to me, because you look at what's in the fire fund right now of $9 million. Number one is the union's not going to stop asking for pay increases, respectfully, okay? And even if we didn't give one, they get steps, so that it's going to go up. So that intersection to where the cost of service exceeds revenues coming in is going to hit somewhere in the next decade. And so what revenue sources do you have to be able to pay for fire service? And you have increasing your sales tax, which, as long as we grow the community, there's going to be a small growth. You have public safety districts, but we know there's a limit in how much we can collect from the millage, because the fire department's only going to get a portion of that, whether it's half or something less. LifeRide is another way to look at requiring all of our citizens, all of our utility customers, to help pay for the important service of EMS, which is really there if you need it. And so, to me, it's something we should really consider. And I'm not asking for a decision tonight, but I'm just letting you know that if council said yes and you amended the ordinance or the model, you'd be telling 12,056 customers that their monthly bill is going to go up $5.45 for EMS services, which means we'd have to do a very good marketing campaign, and I think people would understand what it's a part of your quality of life. Really, really is. So I just something I want to throw out there for conversations, discussions with the council members. Any comments from Brandon, from Jeremy or Chief Stewart about the importance of this? But it's just something we need to have a conversation about it, I believe.
Do you have that percentage that Tulsa has as far as, do they make it mandatory in Tulsa?
Chief, can you speak to that, or we can find out, Johnny, if we.
If you can find that out.
I don't believe, it's not mandatory in Tulsa.
Okay, and find out if theirs has dropped that much. This is nearly a 10% drop every 2 years that it's dropping. You say that it really is costing us, and we didn't envision that to start with, but it's wondering if there's something there. You know, I'm ready to say that we need to have it, you know what I mean? And we can vote on it whenever you want to vote on it, but I think it needs to be mandatory since it's dropping like that, because I don't want to lose our service.
Well, and I'm interested to know, those that don't have it, how hard is it to collect the difference? Because if we're not collecting it, then the people who don't have it are still getting the same benefit as the people who do.
Tom and Chief, you want to talk about collections?
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Tom,
We do have a collections agency, and so for those that don't pay, they are turned over to collections. We do not report to credit agencies, so our collections don't have as much bite as they might otherwise.
Why don't we?
Because it's the opinion of our legal department that, and others, that ambulance doesn't really, municipal ambulance, something specific about it does not fit into the credit reporting agency part of it. Not being a lawyer, but there's an element of that, and we have.
A debt's a debt.
We have spoken with a couple of different collection agencies. Their court is actually getting ready to change their collection agency, and the new entity they're going with, they won't, they will do ambulance, but they will not report to credit agencies.
I mean, that's what frustrates me about this, is you've got people who are paying an annual or a monthly fee who receive a benefit if they use the ambulance. They may never use an ambulance, but they're still paying a monthly fee. And then you have people who don't pay a monthly fee, and which as right now is their right to do, but then they darn well better pay the difference when they use the ambulance, because I mean they're electing not to buy the insurance, so to speak. It's an insurance, $5.45 a month insurance, so that I don't have to worry about paying the difference. And if our collections is not successfully collecting these fees, I mean, I'd want to know what that percentage is of the percentage of people who owe us money. How much is not being collected, because that they're getting an unfair benefit to every other resident here who's paying for the insurance. So
Can you grab that? Can you gather that, Tom?
We can get that information from EMSNC.
And Michael, I think I talked with you about this the other day, about I'm interested in knowing the demographic of who isn't paying, because if it's a certain lower income part of our city, that it seems like that is, of those people that aren't paying, it's just because, $60 a year, even just $5 a month cuts into their Social Security checks or whatever. I mean, that makes more sense than someone living, at the lakes, not paying the $5.45. I mean, there's a difference.
Yeah, I'm going to try to gather that information. Because really, we'd have to get it from the utility customers, the information they provide us.
Yeah.
So maybe I need to, and just haven't had a chance with Tom and Cindy to sit down together, but we are going to try to gather it.
There would be a consistency, because neighbors talk. Like, I mean, I'm not paying that. You should call them. You can take that off your bill.
I'm sure that's happening.
I mean, I would think we maybe could see a pattern, I don't know, or like church congregations. It's like bunco groups that they all.
How often do we send out information about getting on one?
Every October is the enrollment period, and we do social media blitzes and that kind of thing. We talk about it, but we don't do targeted mailers or that type of thing.
Because we don't have a newsletter anymore in our utility, that we don't do anything on our utility bills or anything.
Well, we actually try to provide information, but the concern is that you go and you tell people it's, you actually making people aware of it would cause them. I thought the same thing, Mayor. You start telling people about it, you could actually get the reverse effect.
Well, I think at this point, people who aren't paying it, in my mind's eye, and I'm willing to be corrected, but in my mind's eye, the people who aren't paying the monthly fee
We know who you are.
are, the people who aren't paying the monthly fee have an advantage. Because if we're not collecting it, or we're not collecting a certain percentage of it, being, because the benefit is I have to worry about paying that extra.
And they maybe just don't really understand what it is.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair to the people paying it every month, who never use it, but they're still paying it because it's the insurance. And if you don't pay the insurance, you need to pay the penalty for not having the insurance on the back end. And so I'm curious to know how much is uncollected.
Yeah, we can find that out.
Like someone that's on Medicare, Medicaid, do they have to pay? Like, is there any out of pocket for those people if the ambulance comes?
I mean, depending on your supplement, et cetera, but if from my own parents' experience, just basic Medicare does not cover the full cost of an ambulance ride. I mean, we do have a obligatory write-off, so to speak, for Medicare patients. There's an agreed amount that Medicare is going to pay, and because we are an electronic recipient of Medicare funds, et cetera, we have agreed to accept that amount as the Medicare amount, and so we have a write down to that amount, but it's not necessarily 100% of our costs for all Medicare patients.
Let me add on to that. The federal government has a program called GEMT. Because we're a participant in that program for Medicare, Major Myrick over EMS has gone out and found this federal government money that right now is close to $750,000. So it's a nice little bonus that he went out and found for us, and we get an annual check of between $600,000 and $800,000 because they're actually kind of supplementing those Medicare runs that we're making.
I want it to be fair to everyone, and right now it seems like it's not.
Does Sooner Care have the same agreement?
I don't know. I don't know for sure.
See if we can find out. Well, that's something I really want to continue the conversation about. I've got a good flavor from the council members. I think everyone should have to pay because of the cost. Even to me, everyone not paying the cost of EMS is expensive, and we want to pay our folks what we negotiated, and they're paramedics. They're providing advanced life support paramedic services, and we want that. We want to have as many as we can be paramedics. So basically, when they roll, if they have to, they're going to get the best care and best coverage.
Well, I mean, in my opinion, we provide a superior product in Broken Arrow, so there's a price to be paid for that superior product.
So, okay, I got a couple of questions that people have asked here, so we'll get that information, and then I want to at some point continue the conversation about it and get some direction from the governing body. So, okay, moving on. In closing, we built a conservative focus that will help ensure Broken Arrow continues to provide a level of services that residents desire while maintaining the modest tax implications taxpayers have come to expect. I believe the initiatives and the spending priorities recommended in this budget submission reflect not only the goals of the City Council, but also the priorities of the residents and taxpayers of Broken Arrow. Putting together this document takes a lot of work. I want to thank the council for their time, their leadership, and support. And secondly, the leadership team for their thoughtfulness in the budget prep and managing their operations. Cindy, Arnold and her team, Tom Cook and the entire, we got several members of finance here today. They did a great job assembling everything, going through the numbers. I'd like to thank them for their help. Obviously, the city manager's team, Kenny, Norm, Cricket, and Michaela, they did yeoman's work, and I'm very appreciative of all their efforts. And also to the citizens, they're not here today, but they will have a chance to comment on June 6th. I appreciate their input, not only to me, but to all of you, because we do try to build our budget around making sure that we listen to what they say. And if you look at the level of services they receive, I think that's ultimately that's a reflection of listening to them about what they think is a priority in our city. So to all the presenters tonight, for Rocky, the Chiefs, Tom Cook, Cindy, Kenny, everyone, Larry, everyone that spoke, anyone could come up here and basically defend their expenditures, in my mind, if they needed to. And I appreciate the council members' time, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
This will be streamed before the 6th, I'm sure, right?
What's the plan?
What was the question again? I'm
Will
sorry.
it be streamed before the 6th?
On our website before the 6th.
We can certainly put it on our YouTube channel.
Yeah. Make that available. Yeah. Does anybody on the staff have any questions or comment, things they want to, before we close? Kenny? Cindy? Kenny? Norm, I should say. Norm, Kenny, Cindy?
I just want to thank everyone for their time.
Okay, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Are there any remarks from governing body members?
I just want to thank everybody for their hard work on this too. We killed some trees putting this together, but it's really good information. Thank you.
Very informative.
Yeah.
Good job. Easy to read. Russ.
Absolutely. Any other updates or remarks by the city manager?
No, ma'am.
All right. Entertain a
Make a
motion.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion in 2 seconds. Roll call?
Ford.
Yes.
Udi.
Yes.
Parks.
Yes.
Gillespie.
Yes.
Wimpy.